Kristen ran home, opened the door, and found herself in the dark silence of the hallway. She realized with secret relief that it seemed like no one was home, which meant she would have time to cook dinner. As usual, throwing her bag on the nightstand, she kicked off her shoes and moved towards the kitchen. But before reaching it, she suddenly stopped, waved her hand, and abruptly changing direction, entered the room. She sat down on the sofa, leaned back, and closed her eyes with pleasure. How good it is to just sit down and do nothing for at least a while. Kristen suddenly clearly realized how tired she was. This was not the kind of fatigue that any person experiences after a hard day of work, some task requiring physical exertion, or, for example, after a sleepless night. Kristen's fatigue was somehow endless, hopeless, overwhelming. And if she could get rid of the first one by simply resting and speaking out, then it was still unclear what she should do with her feelings. Her whole life in the last few years had been like an endless race in a circle. Housework, work, Andrew, child. In general, everything was familiar, ordinary, like everyone else. Millions of women live in exactly the same way, but no one considers this something special, does not lament the injustice in women's lot, or complains about fate. Take, for example, her best, in fact, if you look at it, her only friend since school. Her position is the head of the legal department of a huge commercial company, with a bunch of people subordinate to her. Of course, the salary is more than decent, but the responsibility is scary to think about. And not only for yourself, but also for others. By the way, there are 3 children and a husband. Or, as Helen jokingly calls him, my eldest child, hinting at some immaturity of her dear person. At home, Helen fundamentally does everything herself, although it is unclear when and how she gets everything done, given the size of their apartment, the presence in it of 3 teenagers, a large dog, and a scientist husband, a man, to put it mildly, not practical. How, despite all this, she managed to maintain her blooming appearance and cheerful disposition from year to year was a huge mystery to everyone. For everyone except Lena, who, flashing a smile, told Kristen, I've been telling you the same thing for many years, you need to love and respect yourself. Understand, Kristen brushed aside her friend's words, considering it a hackneyed and meaningless phrase. She believed that she certainly respected herself. Just how can this feeling help her to do everything, and most importantly, to feel as easy and calm, to be as humanly happy as the same Helen? She didn't understand. Well, from tomorrow a completely different life begins. And she herself, Kristen, a 33-year-old woman who just a few years ago, no one had ever given her age, and now looking 50 years old, will never be the same. She will be fine. Kristen was raised by her mother. The girl did not remember her father. As her mother, whose name was Anne, later told her, he fell ill and died suddenly when Kristen was not yet 2 years old. Life turned out so that they had no one else in the world except each other. Mom, having buried her husband, did not even try to arrange her personal life anymore and devoted herself entirely to her daughter. Her whole life and every moment of it were devoted to the child. The girl's health from birth was poor. She was frankly behind her peers in height and energy. She was often sick, and Anne spent her first few years in constant fear that something terrible and irreparable was about to happen to her daughter. Mother, you cannot do it this way. An elderly pediatrician who had been observing Kristen since birth ironically reprimanded her. You will go crazy before your Kristen goes to school. For example, now a girl has a common cold, and you are panicking. As if we have identified a terrible infection in your child. Having matured a little, Kristen became stronger and almost caught up with the children of her age. And yet she still remained fragile, touching, and defenseless. She spoke little, and almost always kept her head slightly lowered. And her favorite pastime from early childhood was drawing. Anna had no education other than school. She worked as a cloakroom attendant in the city theater, and of course their family did not have much money left. While Kristen was little, this did not affect her life in any way. On the contrary, she considered her mother's work to be the best, because the girl could watch all the performances for free. And the New Year holidays with successive children's performances, which she watched one after another, not paying attention to the repeating plots of the same characters, generally turned into a continuous holiday for her. What is unimportant and invisible to a baby looks completely different to a teenager. Growing up, Kristen, of course, could not help but notice that she was the worst in the class. She was poorly dressed. She had the oldest briefcase, a gift from one of the neighbors. And in physical education class, she wore the funniest sneakers, the kind you can only see in old photographs, and not sneakers like everyone else. She watched in amazement as her classmates defiantly threw money out of their pockets in front of each other, showed off their belongings, and discussed family trips to seaside resorts and the upcoming holidays. Despite this, it never occurred to Kristen to blame her mother for anything. She saw that she was doing everything she could for her daughter. She just could do very little. Her health failed her at times. Small, thin, she, giving her growing daughter an extra, sweeter piece, lived practically from hand to mouth, and from year to year wore the same drafty coat and boots, the soles of which had long lead in everything they stepped on. And what only the soul holds on to. So skinny. The neighbors shook their heads, watching Anne as she always hurried somewhere. But what Kristen understood and patiently endured, her peers could not understand and tolerate. With the harshness and cruelty characteristic of many teenagers, they hurled vile words in her direction, at first in a whisper, not really understanding the inadmissibility of this. But with age they did it more and more consciously. At the beginning of the next school year, the class in which Kristen studied was supposed to go on an excursion to a neighboring city. The guys were, of course, excited about the upcoming trip and heatedly discussed it and made plans. One of the points of the program was a visit to the opera and ballet theater famous throughout the country. Kristen, who has loved theatrical performances since childhood, was looking forward to this particular event with special interest and already knew the theater's repertoire and the schedule of performances by heart. We should go to this theater, discussed the guys, who for the most part were not delighted with the attempts to introduce them to high art. It would be better if we went to the zoo. What is there to even see? Who knows what we will watch? Carmen Kristen suddenly announced with unusual excitement. Her voice sounded unexpectedly loud, and everyone turned in her direction. Are you planning to go too? Suddenly Kristen asked the most beautiful, by everyone's own opinion, girl in the class, Sarah. Kristen looked around hauntedly and felt her ears begin to burn. Ugh. You will disgrace us in front of everyone, said Sarah. I can imagine what you will wear to the theater. Probably in that terrible sundress, knitted, with flowers, which you wore on March 8th. By the way, if you think this is festive clothing, then I want to disappoint you. This is clothing for a stuffed animal. Why did you go and take off that sundress from him? Kristen felt tears boiling in her eyes. She lowered her head low, and a warm drop fell on her hand. You better shut up, princess. Suddenly a ringing voice was heard in the class, which easily drowned out the disgusting sycophantic giggles of the children. Otherwise, you yourself won't be able to go anywhere, because I will spank you. You will sit at home and change lotions on your black eye. Understood? Kristen wiped her eyes and raised her head in front of Lara. With her fists on her sides, stood a girl named Helen. Everyone knew better than to mess with her. Not only has she been seriously involved in some type of martial arts for a long time and can easily beat not only Sarah, but also any of the boys, but she also has a brother, Victor, who studies in high school. And everyone again knows that Victor is the guy is athletic, serious and authoritative. What are you doing? Sarah asked in amazement. Are you standing up for this scarecrow? You yourself, scarecrow, she retorted. And in general, if anyone comes to her again or says something nasty, they will have to deal with me, okay? Thank you, Kristen said quietly, getting closer to her unexpected intercessor at the next break. What? Helen asked. What are you muttering there? I don't understand. And anyway, why do you always talk as if you're going to die? I'm saying. Kristen took a deep breath and spoke louder. Thank you for helping me. Oh, nonsense, Helen waved it off. Sarah should have been put in her place a long time ago. My mistress too. She became completely insolent. Yes, and it's your own fault. Why are you silent? You always endure like some kind of sheep. Do you like being insulted? And anyway, why are you some kind of orphan? And I am an orphan. Kristen laughed quietly. Well, that is half. I only have my mother. Oh, excuse me, please, Kristen. Helen was confused. I haven't paid attention to such little things for a long time. Well, anyway, thank you again for standing up for me. Kristen nodded and turned to leave and sit at the last desk, where she almost always sat alone. Hey, you wait. Helen moved decisively after her. Come on, you will sit with me now. Like this? Kristen was confused. But Oleg is sitting with you. Just think, Oleg is sitting. It's okay. It means he'll change seats. Oleg, Helen barked at the whole class, turning to one of her classmates, quickly pull yourself together and go to the last desk. Her eyesight is poor. She needs to sit closer to the board. From that day on, Kristen's life, at least at school, changed dramatically. She no longer felt like an outcast, and people began to greet her. At first, stuttering, forced, with an eye on the omnipresent Helen, and then simply and habitually, because this is normal. Kristen has become a much better student. It turned out that she has an excellent memory. But the most important thing is that everyone learned about her talent. To the first secret, and then obvious admiration of her class, it turned out that she draws incredibly well. Kristen has even changed in appearance for the better. She stopped clenching herself as she had done before, as if trying to be as inconspicuous as possible. And then, to everyone's amazement, it turned out that Kristen was actually very good at something. Anna inherited from her mother fragility, grace, good, thick, slightly curly hair, dark brown, slightly red, long eyelashes, and beautiful, even white teeth, which everyone finally saw after their owner began to smile. All this became very noticeable in high school. Helen never gave up on anything halfway, and having taken a kind of patronage over Kristen, she did not limit herself to forcing the class to accept Kristen and begin to treat her normally. A few days after the memorable conversation, she dragged her new friend to her home. Then she introduced her classmate to her parent. "Mom, let's give her my jeans." "Well, those that didn't bother me after the summer." "Well, maybe there's more." Her mother, looking at her compassionate child with a smile, turned her eyes to thin Kristen. She knew the girl, of course. "I heard about her difficult fate and the cheerful life of her small family." "Yes, please, I don't mind," she nodded. "But if Kristen herself doesn't mind, of course, bring the jeans. And remember, if you don't stop eating so much bread, you'll soon be able to give Kristen all your clothes." "Come on," Kristen Helen mumbled, thrusting almost new pants into Kristen's hands. "They're just lying there anyway. And what do you give me for this?" "Well, I don't know, I came up with an idea. You will draw my portrait." By her senior year, things were looking up for Kristen. Helen's efforts and care showed, and Kristen herself became a completely different person. Soon, the highlight of the school exhibition were ironic drawings and cartoons by Kristen, in which the children recognized themselves and each other with delight and amazement. After this, Kristen became, if not a star, then at least a person whose unconditional abilities were recognized by everyone at school. In addition, she is the class beauty of the class. Kristen's longtime follower, Sarah, suddenly became covered with teenage acne, and Kristen, on the contrary, blossomed with some special, subtle, translucent girlish beauty that not everyone notices, but which cannot be forgotten once you see it. After graduating from school, Kristen entered art school. The girl had no prior preparation. However, during the creative exam, Kristen, fulfilling the examiner's assignment, really shined and was accepted. "You are very gifted," one of the admissions committee members told her. "You have an amazing innate sense of composition and color. But you have poor technical skills and are not at all prepared in terms of theory. You need to work a lot and read in your specialty, dear girl. Well, for example, let's take this portrait from your portfolio. It is, of course, very interesting in the manner of execution, but at the same time it contains a lot of mistakes." Well, look, the teacher launched into long, lengthy analyses of her work. By the way, a portrait of Lena. And Kristen listened to her work with delight. "How can he even judge my portrait if he has never seen me? The portrait is awesome. Everyone says this, see, it looks like me. Well, just like a photograph, only 100 times better. I've never looked good in photos, but here it's so great." Helen, he wasn't talking about the similarity, but about technical errors. But, you know, the composition itself, proportions, light and shade, plasticity. "Oh, okay, don't bother me with all this. I still won't understand anything. You draw just great." Kristen enjoyed studying at school and drew every free minute of her life. Helen, with her characteristic practicality, declared that not everyone can be great creators. Someone needs to earn money, and she entered the university to study law. The girls, of course, saw each other much less frequently than when they were at school, but they still constantly maintained friendly relations. Kristen felt more than just gratitude towards Helen for the fact that her friend had once, in fact, completely changed her life. She saw Helen as an older sister, and the latter, on the contrary, having taken part in the fate of a school outcast several years ago, was sincerely proud of her friend and perceived her as the younger sister she never had. Things were going very well for Kristen at school. She was really talented. Her work was noted as one of the best. and after a couple of years they started talking about her as a young artist with her own style. You see, girl, the elderly teacher who was their course leader explained to her with inspiration. An artist is not someone who can draw a cat or a tree exactly as it looks in reality or in a photograph. This is not an artist, this is a copying machine. And an artist is someone who lives in his own world and knows how to show this world to others with light, form, and strokes. Here you have it, this sketch, for example. God knows how you managed to make me see an old man here. Kristen laughed along with the teacher and meticulously looked at the sheet from which, framed by gray hair swaying in the wind, the prickly, stern gaze of a wise elderly man peered into her. Time fled, and my studies at the school quickly ended. She received a diploma as an artist teacher, and with it a complete lack of understanding of what to do next. At the graduation ceremony, the rector told her, "Well, you are perhaps one of our most talented students in recent times. But unfortunately, in modern times, this is not enough. You need opportunities, time, a workshop, tools, materials. Yes, in general, to become an artist, you need money, no matter how bad it may sound. And to become a great artist, you need a lot of money." The man paused and sighed heavily. "Still, I wish you success. Maybe not now, later, someday, but your gift certainly deserves it." Hearing this was both pleasant and scary at the same time. But Kristen didn't want to think about her fate yet. She was young, beautiful, happy, and all the thoughts of her and her former classmates were occupied with their graduation evening. They decided to celebrate their graduation at the highest level, in a fashionable nightclub. Mom gave her daughter silver earrings. They were made in the form of the thinnest leaves, which intertwined with each other and ended in an elegant flower with a small diamond in the center. Mom, what a miracle. Kristen took a long time to come to her senses and didn't even realize right away. "How are you? Where did you get the money?" Anne finished asking her daughter. "Well, honey, your mother is not such a loser that she couldn't save up for a gift for her only girl." Kristen's nose stung and her eyes itched. And then Kristen put on her dress, prepared for going out to the club, and now it was Anne's turn to sigh in admiration and wipe her eyes. Only she did it without hiding, and without hiding her happy tears. The dress was extraordinary, very simple, straight, with almost no details. It was made of elastic, but at the same time dense fabric. The dress fit her figure like a glove, creating a silhouette of incredible beauty and femininity. The rather deep cutout on the back was absolutely breathtaking. The color of the fabric was in great harmony with the loose, light chestnut curls, and the light, barely noticeable makeup only emphasized the calm, somehow unusual, as if a little not modern, and this made it even more attractive, beauty of the girl. When Kristen appeared among her classmates, everyone simply gasped. She read undisguised admiration in the guy's eyes. But many girls looked at her with poorly concealed envy. All these sensations were completely unusual for Kristen, and made her head spin no less than the light wine that the waiter periodically poured into her. The party was in full swing. The music and conversations became louder, faces became hotter, and the behavior of those around them became freer. Many of the guys went dancing, and Kristen, who had never been to this kind of place before, watched with curiosity what was happening on the dance floor. "Can I bother you?" She heard a man's voice above her. Kristen raised her head. A young man stood in front of her. With the tenacious gaze of an artist, she instantly took in all the details, noted the harmonious facial features, figure, neatly styled blonde hair, and most importantly, incredibly beautiful hands with long fingers and surprisingly graceful wrists for a man. She immediately drew attention to his hands, because the man was holding in them an amazingly beautiful, blooming rose on a long stem. How beautiful, the girl burst out completely involuntarily. "It is for you." He handed her a flower, a beautiful rose for the most beautiful girl in the club. "Well, why are you embarrassed, Kristen?" "No need. After all, it turns out that I begged her from you. How can I put it?" It turns out he laughed cheerfully. "Although no, of course I brought it just for you as a bribe." "Bribery?" she asked again incomprehensibly. "Yes, bribery." The guy smiled. His smile was extremely charming. I immediately wanted to smile back. "I just thought that if I tried to give you a flower and you accepted it, it would be awkward for you to refuse me the dance. I'll take the rose from you, but I still won't go dancing." "But why?" He looked really and truly upset. "You don't like me at all." "Not at all, not a bit. And you can't even stand me for one dance?" "No, why? You are very pretty. I just don't know how to dance at all. Well, not a bit. Moreover, the conversation that took place between them under the roar of club music was, of course, a simple and light track, without any pretensions to content. It was a non-binding conversation between a guy and a girl. They were a little inspired by the atmosphere, music, drinking, youth, and freedom. Kristen, for the first time feeling so liberated about her attractiveness and femininity, the power of all this over men, did not recognize herself at all. It seemed that there were no barriers, no conventions, no obligations, nothing that would prevent her from cheerfully chatting about anything with this terribly handsome guy, saying words that a few hours ago she would have been embarrassed to even think. "I can't do that either," the guy waved his hand. "You know, there's another establishment not far from here. It's very decent. It has a completely different atmosphere and wonderful live music. Perhaps you would agree to continue the evening there? I invite you, please do not refuse. You know, today is my birthday. It so happened that I was left alone. If you would agree to sit with me for a while, it would be the best gift for me. Please." He folded his hands in some kind of prayerful gesture, and Kristen once again involuntarily noted their grace. She looked around uncertainly. Many of the former students were already pretty tipsy. Until recently, the funny crowd had broken up into couples and groups, and one could be sure that hardly anyone would notice its disappearance. She looked again at her new acquaintance. He was so attractive, dressed in a white shirt, black trousers, and a formal jacket. He stood out among the drunken denim crowd, like a noble hare among mules. But most importantly, he looked at her with such admiration, and this look excited her so much that her legs lifted Kristen from the table. "Well, even though I don't understand what's going on and why I'm behaving this way, I agree," she said. "Thank you." The guy's eyes darkened. He gallantly pulled his hand away and offered it to Kristen. "Oh, wait." She suddenly stopped and laughed. "What is this, really? I'm almost ready to go with you to God knows where, and I don't even know your name." "Sorry, it's my fault. I lost my head." He smiled sweetly and spread his arms, bowing playfully. "Let me introduce myself, Andrew." "Kristen." She curtsied. "Well, everyone, it seems like all the formalities have been completed. Let's go." He suddenly took her hand and quickly, as if fearing that they would be stopped, walked towards the exit. They were sitting in a small, cozy restaurant, which, after the roar and hustle and bustle of the club, felt unusually good. A wonderful tea rose stood in a vase with water. Kristen looked over the flower at Andrew, and she wanted this night to never end. "You promised me a dance," he suddenly said and extended his hand. "And you promised to teach me how to dance," she answered. His hand lay softly and tenderly on her waist. She put her hands on his shoulders and felt happy. Apparently, he sensed the moment and gently pulled her towards him. She took a deep breath. "You know, I have to go." Kristen literally forced herself to say these words. "Why did I somehow offend you?" He tried to look into the girl's eyes. No, what are you talking about? Everything was amazing. It was a wonderful evening, maybe the best of my life. But it's already very late. But I will see you again." He persistently tried to catch her eye. "I don't know, I'm not sure if this is necessary. Maybe it's not worth it. Just let everything remain as it is. Andrew, you are a wonderful guy. I had a very good time with you today. Happy birthday." Kristen stood on her tiptoes and kissed him on the cheek. She approached the exit but could not stand it and turned around. Andrew sat at the table, looking after her in confusion. She laughed joyfully, returned, and stroked his hair. "Write down my phone number." It was incredibly easy for her. Everything seemed simple and natural. For the first time in her life, she simply did what she wanted, without thinking about how right or decent it was. They started meeting every day. They walked around the city, sat on benches in the park, rowed a boat on the old pond, ate cakes in small summer cafes. "We're going to a restaurant this evening," he suddenly declared. "You should wear that amazing dress you wore to your prom." "Why is that?" Kristen was surprised. "Because today is our anniversary. It's been exactly a week since we met," Andrew solemnly announced. At first she laughed, but then realized that he was completely serious. And again there was a beautiful rose in a crystal glass, light wine and a gentle melody, Andrew's hands on her back and shoulders. "I was wrong when I told you that you were the most beautiful girl in the club," he whispered. That is, she was amazed, despite the bliss that overwhelmed her. "Are you trying to say that I'm not that good?" I just want to say that you are the most beautiful girl in the world. What woman doesn't want to hear such words? Who among them can stand against them? They spent the night together. In a small but cozy apartment, Andrew. She woke up first and lay there for a long time, not believing what happened to her, trying to realize herself a completely new, different, alien, unfamiliar woman. Andrew was sleeping soundly, and Kristen was looking at him, afraid to move and frighten away the feeling of peace and happiness that covered her in a warm wave. He was lying on the edge of the bed, turned on his side. A dark lock of hair covered his face and hung over the edge of the sofa. He put his other hand under his cheek, and his long fingers tangled in his hair. Kristen quietly made her way to get the album and pencil that were always in her bag. Taking them and trying not to make noise, she sat down in a chair. The drawing appeared on the paper easily and quickly, but still she was not finished yet. Andrew stirred and opened his eyes. "What are you doing?" he said, seeing her concentrated face. "I'm drawing the most beautiful fingers I've ever seen." Kristen smiled. "Fingers?" Andrew asked in amazement and jumped up from the sofa and approached the girl. "What other fingers? Come on, show me. Why fingers? Is this the only thing attractive about me?" "You have very beautiful hands." "No, really. I noticed it immediately as soon as I saw you for the first time there, in the club." "Come on, stop it, you'll say the same." "I have stupid hands, small like a girl's. Mom says that such hands are a shame for a man. Although everything about you really seems beautiful. Damn, this is just great. You are a real artist. Let me kiss you urgently for this. Come on, look at me." Helen, whom Kristen had not seen for several weeks, and looked at her friend with surprise. "Listen, what's wrong with you? You're just glowing." "Kristen, admit it, what's going on? Fell in love or what?" Helen said the last phrase just like that, without thinking, and froze when she saw Kristen nodding vigorously, her eyes shining in her smile. "Wow," Helen said slowly. "Are you with a man? I thought this would never happen. So what, he's one of your crazy ones? Shaggy artist. Will you eat 1 briquette of instant noodles a day for 2 and draw imperishable masterpieces?" "No," Kristen laughed. "He's not one of us. He's completely different. Wonderful, gentle, smart. In general, it's clear. The best." A friend finished for her. "And when will I be introduced to this miracle of miracles? I just really want to look at the prints. You know, in recent years I have been seeing horses more and more." By this time, Helen had been married to her classmate for 3 years and was raising little sons, twins. She and her husband truly loved each other. The sons, of course, were adored. The phrase about horses was most likely intended to emphasize the heroic build of her men. Soon Helen and Andrew met. He was polite, reserved, and seemed a little afraid. She carefully probed him with her gaze and her trademark irony. "Well, what can I tell you?" Helen hugged her friend by the shoulders and looked into her eyes. "You love him. It's obvious, and you're happy. Here he is. You know, it seemed to me." "Oh, okay, everything will be fine. I am so happy for you." Summer was ending. The best summer in Kristen's life was spent with her loved one. Kristen went to work at an art school and began teaching drawing to children of all ages. The business was, of course, not entirely profitable, but it brought Kristen a lot of pleasure. Every day, ideas for future paintings of my own raced through my head, and my folders were swelling with sketches. Mom looked in surprise at her daughter, who was either singing songs desperately and out of tune, or spinning around the room like a little girl, and sometimes she was just sitting on a small loggia, raising her face to the soft autumn sun, smiling happily. One September evening, Andrew came in looking somewhat excited. It took Kristen a long time to gain control of his spirit, his words, and finally spoke. "Kristen, in general, I told my family about you. You probably remember, I told you I was not born here, I'm from." He said the name of a large village 50 kilometers from the city. "I have a large family, father, mother, grandfather, 2 uncles, 3 aunts. And this, mind you, I'm not talking about their wives and husbands." Despite the tension, Andrew suddenly laughed, obviously imagining his numerous relatives. "I also have 2 sisters and a younger brother. I have never counted my cousins, but there are even more of them. In general, I'm from a camp," he joked, having finished listing family members. Kristen listened with amazement about the family. She had no one in the world except her mother, and she simply could not imagine what it was like to have so many relatives. "Listen, you are a happy person," she said, "to have so many relatives who love you. Well, they want to get to know you, you know? And I promised that we would come next Saturday. But I have to warn you, my mother. Well, how can I explain it to you? She is so very domineering. She loves everything to be the way she wants. Well, she was very surprised when I told about the fact that we are together, that you and I have a relationship. And she, of course, has a lot of questions at once, both about you and in general, Understand." It seems Kristen smiled cheerfully, although inside, to be honest, everything was shaking. "And most likely, I am not at all the option that she wants for you." "Well, what does this have to do with it?" Andrew exclaimed. "Whether Mom wants it or not, it doesn't matter. Well, or rather not really. Of course it doesn't." He was completely confused in his explanations, became confused, fell silent and looked pitifully at Kristen. "Okay, I understand everything. Well, in fact, I understand perfectly well that I am not the most enviable option. Any mother in your place would not be very happy with such a girl for her son. If I were your mother, I wouldn't even let someone like me on the threshold." Kristen laughed, trying to make fun of Andrew's excitement and her own fear of meeting his family. Finally, the day appointed for the trip arrived. Kristen brought herself to an extreme state of anxiety with anticipation and did not sleep all night the night before she was tormented by the question how to dress. Do I need to wear makeup and do my hair? What will they think if she appears, so to speak, in a simple way? He'll say he doesn't respect us at all, so he needs to be on parade. What if they think she came to show off? When they ask about her family, maybe they can somehow remain silent and not talk too much about it. Lord, why did she agree to this trip? On the other hand, sooner or later she will have to meet his family if she wants to be with Andrew, and she really wants to. Her friend calmed her down, advising her to calm down. "You can't show them any weakness, otherwise they'll quickly sit on your neck. I would like to go with you," Helen. Kristen finished dreamily, imagining what a meeting with Andrew's relatives could turn into with the participation of a friend in the role of her lawyer. She laughed merrily. As always, Lena's reasoning worked flawlessly. Kristen calmed down and met Andrew, who was following her, with a smile. "Well, are you ready?" he asked. "No," she answered honestly. "Kristen, just don't worry, okay? The main thing is that everything goes more or less smoothly with Mom. Everyone else will like you, I'm sure." Andrew muttered and was embarrassed, realizing that he was not saying at all what was needed. And he himself is worried, it seems, even more than Kristen. Kristen and Andrew arrived in the village and, excited, like first graders before their first lesson in their lives, holding hands, they entered the big house. They were really expected, because the spacious living room with huge windows was full of people. Some of them pretended to be doing something, but the majority were not lying. Frankly, and with curiosity, they looked at the chosen one. At first glance, it was clear who exactly was the center of public opinion here. A tall, plump woman of about 50, with a high, carefully styled hairstyle, stood up to meet them. Varnished hair, lips thickly painted with red lipstick, heavy earrings with large red stones, and an equally huge pendant around her neck. A dress made of shiny fabric with an overly bright pattern. All this, of course, was not modern and old-fashioned, but it was, nevertheless, very suitable for this woman. Kristen immediately realized at first sight that this was Andrew's mother, a woman on whom her fate seems to largely depend. Barbara Black was, in every sense of the word, a woman of considerable merit. For many years she worked as the chief accountant of the big vegetable plant, supplying several surrounding cities with fresh vegetables and herbs. The farm was really large and very troublesome, and in order to maintain order in it, one had to have a strong character and determination, great professional knowledge and basic endurance. Barbara possessed all these qualities to the fullest. She always knew about everything that happened at the plant. It doesn't matter what kind of area we were talking about, garages, farming, or the financial service directly subordinate to it. She decisively, and with equal firmness, dealt with negligent employees, unscrupulous suppliers, or late-paying customers. "We need Barbara in the government," the workers laughed. Just as decisively and confidently as at work, Barbara handled household chores. How, with such a workload at work, she managed to keep the house and large household plot in perfect order, one could only guess. However, she had no shortage of help, given the large size of her family. Andrew was born third in their family after two girls. One of the sisters was already married and expecting a baby, and the second lived with her parents and cursed the garden, which needed care. The mother, as it seemed to her, loved her son more in her soul than the other children. For some reason, the long-awaited boy was especially dear to her. She always dreamed of some special destiny for him, and of course it was hardly possible to find this fate here, in their native, albeit in a fairly large and prosperous village. Therefore, she willingly supported her son when he announced his desire to study and live in the city after school. After working at the plant for many years, Barbara and Ben, as Andrew's father was called, saved enough to buy their son a small but quite decent apartment. Andrew graduated from college, received an engineering degree, and got a job. Barbara's appearance suited her character, tall, with large features, which almost always had an expression of determination and confidence in her rightness. With all her appearance, she seemed to be saying to those around her, so it's like this. Point 1, I'm right. Point 2, if I'm wrong. Look at point 1, Barbara had a rather full and wide figure. But in some amazing way, all this did not give the impression of excess weight, but seemed to be a manifestation of strength, solidity. All that remained was to add to this a loud, well-produced voice, from which the repairmen, taken by surprise, dropped their wrenches on the floor. It was precisely such a remarkable lady in every sense of the word that Kristen was destined to like. And yet this village iron businesswoman had one weak point. She loved her husband Ben very much. And this love was mutual. They have been together for more than 30 years. They have gone through difficulties, illnesses, the birth of children, joys and sorrows. And yet they retained some kind of reverent, tender feeling for each other, more likely to be characteristic of a young boy and girl than of 50-year-old parents of 4 children who have begun to turn gray. Ben worked as a chief mechanic at the same plant. He and his wife were jokingly called the Black Mafia. But at the same time, absolutely everyone recognized that both Barbara and Ben took their places completely deservedly and fairly. Ben has long gotten used to his wife's difficult character. I learned to adapt to him, and if necessary, to tame Barbara's temper. She heard only him when it seemed impossible to reach her. She recognized the unconditional authority of her husband, and although she could not deny herself the pleasure of arguing and defending her point of view, she certainly took her husband's opinion into account. Kristen enjoyed her openly appraising gaze and smiled. The smile turned out pitiful and forced. Hello she didn't say, she rather squeaked. In response, she heard, hello, hello, dear guests. Finally, you brought your mysterious stranger to us. Hello, Kristen. Come in. You're welcome. A short, gray-haired man with kind eyes stepped forward. He was very similar to Andrew. He smiled warmly and welcomingly, and Kristen immediately became much calmer. Oh, Andrew looks like him, Kristen finally realized. So this is his dad. My dear son. Finally, he deigned to come and check on us. Barbara finally opened her lips, decisively pushed her husband away, and, as if not noticing Kristen standing next to her, hugged Andrew. Mom, meet me. This is Kristen, he said when he was finally able to emerge from his mother's strong embrace. That's what I understood, said the woman with the face of a queen. Well, let me look at you. Kristen felt that this look was literally breaking her into molecules. Judging by the expression on her face, Barbara didn't particularly like what she saw. True, there were no comments from her. She just took a deep breath. With the rest of the family, everything went much easier and simpler. For the most part, people were friendly and talked with the girl sincerely and with pleasure. She learned many facts about his childhood and youth, and heard somewhat humorous warnings that Andrew was a womanizer. I got acquainted with photographs where he was a baby, still an infant, and sat without clothes, without anything at all. In general, everything was quite fun and positive, if not for the periodically felt glance of Barbara. Then there was a long, plentiful feast, during which they tried to cram a year's worth of food into Kristen. Oh, how great, suddenly one of the sisters exclaimed, snatching a napkin from under Kristen's hand. Kristen did not notice how he sketched a portrait of one of the aunts sitting opposite on a piece of paper. These are living people. Look. Oh, and you're an artist. And draw me. Please. Kristen spent the rest of the evening drawing pictures of those present and receiving admiring reviews. Finally, the endless day came to an end. But okay, that's enough. Let's finish this gathering. Let's all go home. Tomorrow is a hard day. Get up early and get to work, said Barbara. For what work? Andrew asked in surprise. Tomorrow is Sunday. Wait, I thought we would go to the lake, show Kristen our forest, apiary, and generally take a walk, go to a barbecue. How is it? For what work? What barbecue and lake? The mother looked angrily at her son. As far as I can see, you have become quite a city person. You don't think or remember anything at all. We'll dig potatoes tomorrow, Andrew. Well, Mom, what kind of potatoes? We've come to visit. So what? Now will you order us to die of hunger in the winter because of this? We, son, have our own schedule. We have no time for rest now. No, of course, no one is forcing you. Helping us is up to you. Please go for a walk and eat our kebabs. And we have things to do. The woman, looking offended, rose from the table and left the room. For some reason, Kristen's ears lit up. Of course, we must help. True, I have never dug potatoes, but I think it's not that difficult. I'll handle it. She showed a playful look of fear on her face. Kristen, what do you mean help? There's work there all day. Dad, he turned to his father. But I completely forgot about these damn potatoes. You could have warned me. I wouldn't have brought IRA with me. If I came alone, I would bring her next time. Andrew looked at his father reproachfully. Yes, to be honest, I forgot about this damn harvest. I just don't understand why you're so upset. Well, really, as a child, you don't know your mother, do you? Don't pay attention, Ben waved his hand. Well, of course, don't pay attention. When my mother accused me of parasitism in front of everyone, this meat won't go down my throat now. Kristen is hooked. Well, if so, then go with all of us, work there for an hour, and then take my car and leave from there. The father winked at his son, and at the same time his face suddenly looked younger and became somehow boyish. At this moment, father and son were especially similar to each other. Early in the morning, the whole family in several cars was ready to leave. You are going? Well, that's good, son. Barbara looked at her son with a smile, again pretending not to notice Kristen standing next to her. The girl involuntarily noted this. We really need extra male hands. My father is not going. He was urgently called to the plant. We have a serious breakdown there, but he left you the car and said that you agreed on this. For what? Unclear. Barbara shrugged. Andrew winked at Kristen, put his arm around her shoulders and led her to the car. After a few hours spent in the field, Kristen began to feel as if she had always been here and had never seen anything in her life, and would never see anything again, except brown, yellowish and red tubers. By the second break, everything hurt her neck, back, legs, knees, which endlessly bent and unbent, even her fingers, each joint of which throbbed painfully. But she tried not to show it, and, overcoming the ache in her lower back, courageously carried the buckets, which seemed increasingly heavier. Andrew, why do you need so many potatoes? Kristen asked in a whisper, sadly looking around the huge fields and realizing that he couldn't see the edge or end. Listen, to be honest, I never understood this myself. Please forgive me for these damn potatoes. This is just some kind of setup. Come on, it's okay, she muttered, pouring another portion of the Black family's strategic food supply into the pile. Come on, let's go, Andrew begged her several times. My father left me a car. We'll just leave. Nobody will notice. Nobody will notice. Nobody. Your mother? Kristen asked ironically. Well, Mom, of course, will notice. The guy laughed. Of course he will notice, Kristen thought to herself. She just watches me. Without stopping, sooner or later everything ends. Even what seemed endless. The damn potato field is over. Well, city people, thank you for any help, said Barbara. We could manage, of course. Mom, stop it. Andrew stopped his mother, who seemed to be able to explain to Kristen that no one really needed her help, and it was stupid to expect gratitude from her. Why do you rush to her defense all the time, like a cat to a chicken? Honestly, it's downright funny. Am I some kind of monster? Barbara suddenly became offended. Go help me load the shovels into the car, otherwise we'll forget them on the field again, as always. And Kristen and I will stand here and finally talk about our own things. About women's things. Andrew looked at the women uncertainly, and noticing that Kristen nodded, slowly walked towards the car. Well, okay. Now let's get serious, Barbara said after a very long pause. So long that Kristen managed to calm down, get scared, and come to her senses again. Tell me this, Kristen. Barbara reluctantly said the girl's name. You and my son have a serious relationship. Well, are you planning to marry him? To be honest, Barbara, he didn't ask me to marry. For now, anyway. Kristen decided to be brave and looked directly into the eyes of her opponent. But if he calls, I will consider this offer very seriously. You'll think about it. Are you still going to think? Judging by the indignation, Barbara did not appreciate the irony and was sincerely indignant. Look, she's still getting ready to think. What about you yourself? Such a big jewel? I am not a very profitable party at all. Or rather, completely unprofitable, Kristen tried to joke. But the woman did not take this as playful irony. Vice versa. It's very good that you understand this yourself, and you should always remember it. After all, apparently you have nothing. Housing, for example. Yes, I live with my mother, and unfortunately I don't expect an inheritance from anywhere. But I believe in miracles. You never know. Kristen kept trying to soften Andrew's mother, make her laugh, and remove anger and tension from their communication. But she understood everything wrong. But I immediately realized that you were not very well brought up. You don't have to demonstrate this again. I take it you don't have a profession either. Why not? I actually finished school. I tried to defend myself, Kristen. I have a diploma as an artist teacher, by the way, with honors. Well, what kind of profession is this? Draftsman. Honors. Do not make me laugh. I have a younger niece, and she can draw. Well, maybe a little worse than you. So what? How are you going to make a living? Or are you planning to sit on our necks? I don't dare Kristen to sit on your neck, Barbara. Kristen said quietly. And in general, I would like to tell you. If not for us, then for my son. The woman continued, as if not noticing Kristen's words. That is, Andrew will work for you too, and you will draw pictures. Is this how you see your family life? But nothing will work out for you. Don't move. Listen, I won't say it again. If you want to marry my son, get a normal profession. Do you hear? Barbara turned around without warning and quickly walked away. Kristen looked after her silently. Well? Andrew asked with obvious concern. How did you communicate? Yes, we talked. Everyone and my father really liked you. And Mom too. She just told me you have a good girl. Wait and see. Imagine. On the way back, Kristen thought so deeply about everything that had been said that she even stopped feeling pain in her muscles. Or maybe Andrew's mother is right. After all, she is an intelligent, experienced woman. She has achieved everything herself, and she runs such a business. And at home, everything is on track with her. Well, in fact, she, Kristen, cannot feed herself even on her salary. How can she count on a normal family? After all, it turns out that she is some kind of freeloader. Returning to the city, Kristen rushed to find out information about advanced training courses and other ways to obtain additional education. A few days after their return, Andrew spoke with a serious face. Have you thought about studying somewhere else? And I was talking to my mother. She says accountants are needed everywhere now. I don't know how to do it correctly, but in general, you can easily find a job. She even has a friend here in our city. They will hire you without experience. You just need to complete special courses. Kristen looked at Andrew carefully. He understood this look and spoke. Kristen, you understand, Mother won't give us peace anyway. And if you do as she advises, everything will be fine. I didn't tell you my court Kristen as well. Not really my court Kristen. Well, or rather, in fact, of course it's mine, but it's registered to my mother. We have to live there with you. If we decide, Kristen, for my sake. Okay, I'm ready to do anything for you and become anyone, be it a witch or an accountant. I just don't know if I can do it. You see, it will work, he exclaimed confidently. Of course it will work. Everyone can do it. But I'm not everything. I want to do something completely different, I wanted to shout to Kristen, but she remained silent. A few months later, Kristen was working for a large food retail company. She and about 15 other people sat in a huge windowless room, more like a warehouse than an office, and printed an endless document, according to which they then collected and released goods. She now earned almost twice as much as at art school. But there was no talk of any joy or pleasure from work. Kristen felt like a tiny cog in a huge machine. So small and insignificant that even if it falls out, disappears, no one will notice. Kristen, it is you. She heard it once in a big store. Turning around, she saw her old school teacher. He smiled widely. Lord, how glad I am to see you. Well, tell me, how are you doing? Hello. Yes, I live like everyone else. Normally I work. Got married, almost. This is of course wonderful. Congratulations, congratulations. Well, what about creativity, right? I'm still waiting. Maybe you could invite the old man to an exhibition of your works. Drawing is difficult now. Not yet. How so? Are you really not writing at all? It hurts. It's a shame because you have talent. And Kristen, a real talent. Yes, it's a pity. It's a pity. Unfortunately, I still remember your sketches. How so? That's how life turned out. Kristen answered dryly, seeing how the old teacher was lamenting. She, feeling regret, suddenly became offended at him, at herself, at the whole world. She was offended and angry. You see, I need to live on something. It's a pity that the school doesn't teach a course called How Can an Aspiring Artist Avoid Starving to Death? It would be very useful, you know. The old man was taken aback, looked sadly at Kristen and sighed. Well, I was glad to see you. Glad. I wish all the best. He bowed slightly in the old-fashioned manner and walked away. Kristen and Andrew lived in his apartment. A year later, Kristen gave birth to a boy who was named Ted. They never had a wedding. It's just that for some reason neither Kristen nor Andrew talked about it. And then there was no time for that at all. At 2 years old, the baby was diagnosed with heart failure. Kristen's whole life was completely devoted to her son, just as her mother's life had once been dedicated to her. But only if Mom was completely alone, then her beloved man lived in the same apartment with Kristen. At first, despite Ted's illness, she was happy. In any case, she herself was convinced of this. Andrew was caring and gentle. He tried to be at home more often and play with his son. But gradually, at first almost imperceptibly, in some isolated, tiny moments, and then more and more often and clearly, something began to happen that meant the end of their family happiness. Andrew began to sometimes delay returning home, at first occasionally and not for long, but gradually more and more often. Kristen, hello. Listen, there's a lot of work. Don't lose me. Okay, she heard it periodically on the telephone receiver. Then came car breakdowns with visits to the workshop, meeting a friend from the plane, a dentist, urgent trips to see his parents. Kristen and Ted were increasingly alone. Andrew gradually became completely different. A wall grew inexorably between him and Kristen. Kristen was afraid to admit this to herself and stubbornly continued to convince herself that everything in her life was good, and that there were minor problems and troubles in every family. At the same time at work, year after year, she did what she did not like and did not understand. The computer and the numbers in the documents gave me headaches and eyes, and the boredom that overwhelmed her in the office was sometimes unbearable. All the old albums, folders with sketches and sketches, once unfinished canvas paintings, everything that was once so dear to her, was her joy, her essence, was collecting dust in her mother's old closed apartment. Anne herself passed away 2 years ago, just as quietly and unnoticed by others as she lived. And the sadness for my mother was also quiet, muted light. Kristen sometimes came to the small apartment, which now became her apartment. She looked through her works, and she had the feeling that she was looking at her past, covered in dust, but still beautiful. And I didn't want to return to the present at all. In the present, she lived some kind of life that was not her own, an incomprehensible, uninteresting, unnecessary life. Relations with my friend Helen were essentially reduced to telephone conversations, which became less and less frequent. Helen, in her usual straightforward manner, scolded Kristen that she was doing something she didn't like and had completely given up drawing, locked herself at home, and saw nothing but a completely idiotic job, as a friend put it. You live as if under a stick, but look at yourself, you look like, I don't know, a young old woman. Ted, meanwhile, turned 5 years old. Andrew sometimes spent the evenings at home, but they hardly spoke. He sat at the computer or spent time on the loggia with a mobile phone in his hand. Kristen began to involuntarily notice that when she appeared, he tried to minimize the screen on the monitor or turn off the device, or end the conversation. Andrew's phone, which was usually lying around wherever possible, always forgotten by its owner in the most unexpected places, was now always either in his hands or in his pocket. Kristen wandered around the apartment like a ghost, studied with Ted, put him to bed, and went to bed herself. Then she lay for a long time, listening to Andrew settling down for the night in the next room. We need to talk. She finally decided to break the unbearable silence at home. Tell me honestly, do you have someone? He looked at Kristen. Actually, she no longer needed an answer spoken out loud. What happened to us? She asked Andrew. After all, once upon a time, everything was so good with us. You loved me, I loved you. Life was wonderful. What has changed? Why have we changed so much? You are the one who has changed, and I'm no longer interested in you. And then, let's be honest, I never told you that I love you. Did I like you? Yes, very. You were so unusual, not like everyone else, different in everything. And then she turned into some kind of gray mouse. But it's you. You forced me to become different, forced me to change, to leave everything I loved, quit my favorite thing. You. You know, my mother warned me that you would blame us for everything. And so it happened. What did you leave there? What's the matter? You'd think you could be a great artist. Nothing would have come of you anyway. Well, at most I would draw pictures for advertising signs. Kristen closed her eyes tiredly. How right Helen was when she said that she, Kristen, sold herself. And now she is paying for this betrayal. If you expect to get something from me, you are in vain. We are not registered, and you have no rights to my property. Of course you will move out of the apartment. Ted. Kristen looked at the man in panic. He saw this look, and something similar to shame flashed in his eyes. Ted, of course, will live with you. Andrew said embarrassedly. I'm not a bastard to take Kristen away from the child's mother. He seemed to have recovered from his momentary weakness, cast aside his conscience, and continued. And about alimony, keep in mind that I don't officially work. There's nothing special to take from me. If you try to sue me. Andrew, tell me honestly, Kristen, sitting comfortably on a kitchen stool, put her hands on the table and rested her chin on her fists. Did your mother write the words for this speech? What other words? What does this have to do with Mom? He was nervous. Her behavior infuriated him. She didn't make a fuss, didn't cry, didn't beg him for anything. She simply looked at him with her attentive gaze, as if noticing all the details for the future portrait. These are not your thoughts. You can't be that scoundrel. I don't believe. But don't be afraid. In any case, I don't need anything from you. Kristen said, looking at Andrew with sad regret. Everything I need is already with me. What is this? He became wary. What do you mean? Ted, Kristen said calmly. And myself, the real one. The former one, I forgot, Kristen, you. It's just something you don't need. Kristen took Ted's things and went to her old apartment. A few days later, she realized that there was no trace left of her loneliness. She was herself again, the mistress of her life, and paintings and drawings like old friends supported her. With the new job, everything happened completely by accident. Lena, with whom Kristen again communicated, as in the old days, often easily and directly, without choosing Kristen, I had the time and mood, giving themselves to each other and not expecting anything in return, as true friends should communicate, had a birthday. Helen, my dear, happy birthday. Kristen hugged her friend and entered the large living room. She's been here many times. She liked the spacious, bright room with a minimal amount of furniture and a huge shaggy carpet in the center. But today something was wrong. Something was terribly in the way, creating severe discomfort. Kristen looked carefully at the living room and realized exactly what it was: a huge, bright, but surprisingly tasteless flower bouquet standing on the table. It was composed of chic, unusual flowers and greenery, but it gave the impression of some kind of expensive bad taste. Kristen tried not to pay attention to him, but her artistic taste violently protested. No, I'm sorry, but I can't do this, Helen. It's terrible. Where did you get this terrible bouquet? There is no composition, the colors simply oppress each other. Can I correct it a little? This here is completely unnecessary. That's better, right? Well, wait a minute. Helen suddenly stared at her friend. Exactly, I came up with it. This is brilliant, what you need. Listen, I have a client. We are working on a contract with her. FIFA, you know, is all about itself. By the way, she gave me this bouquet. She has several flower shops with a pretense of sophistication. The prices for flowers there are simply terrible. When I looked at one of her contracts with suppliers, I thought that, judging by the figures, she was selling imported medicines. Well, you know, these flowers have a name that will break your tongue. So she complained that she did not have decent bouquet makers. Like them, Helen recalled the right word with a snap of her fingers: florists. Well, what do I have to do with it? Kristen shrugged. I'm not a florist. But you are an artist. Who, if not you, should know what is beautiful and what is not? Exactly. I'll talk to her, we'll send you to courses and start working. You know, Helen, I've had enough courses. I tried to resist Kristen, but Helen, who had gained momentum, was not easy to stop. The new case has taken over Kristen completely. Finally, she again plunged into the beauty of paint, the form of her imagination. Each flower was a separate work of art for her, and those collected together were her personal works. It was as if she was painting human feelings and emotions with colors. She wrote with inspiration, boldly telling stories of love, gratitude, tenderness, and determination with each bouquet. Of course, she, or rather her composition, has regular customers and fans. People sometimes just came to look, admire, and feel the harmony. You know, Kristen, it looks like we need to make a personal showcase for your work, the business owner remarked, smiling. Among her regular clients, Kristen soon began to single out one who periodically went to the flower salon. He was a rather tall, thin man with a small gray beard and hair. He wore thin glasses with gold frames, and all this made his face somehow not modern, as if from the last century. Interesting person. Kristen quietly pointed at him with her eyes to her partner. Someone not from here, as if he appeared from the last century. It will stand for a short time and disappear again. It won't disappear. A girl named Alice answered ironically. He lives quite well in the present. Be calm. Don't you know who it is? Wow, this is George. Well, the same one who runs the car plant. They say he can buy and sell our entire city. He visited us regularly. He has an office nearby, that huge building on the corner. A strange man, he will stand at the display window and stand there, sigh and smile. Maybe he's sick? Well, the rich have their own quirks. Alice was clearly not against continuing the conversation about the visitor, who was interesting in every sense. But Kristen could not stand gossip, and nodding to Alice, stepped aside. Tell me, please. Kristen heard a quiet voice, sounding clear but soft. This is what people say who don't need to be listened to, because everyone already shuts up when they want to say something. Can I talk to the person who compiled them? Yes, please. It's me. Kristen smiled lightly and looked into his eyes. Do you want to buy them? No, I mean yes, or rather he adjusted his glasses. Actually, I would like something like that. No, these are also beautiful, but for me they are too bright, you know. I would like something, how to put it. He fell silent, looking for the right word. Calm down, apparently she suggested. Yes, it's definitely calmer, exactly, the man rejoiced. A very precise word. How did you pick it up? It's not me. This is the theory of artistic art, well-known terminology, answered by Kristen. So you need a calm, warm monochrome? For whom? Can you provide some details? For a woman 56 years old. 3 grandchildren, financier, blonde. He encouraged Kristen's words, taking short pauses between them, and smiled, as if appreciating a new interesting game. Well, I'll try. Kristen smiled in response. This is simply amazing. Each of your bouquets is like, I don't know, like a canvas, a painting. Yes, that's exactly the picture. The man looked admiringly at the bouquet compiled before his eyes. You're just an artist, Kristen, he added, looking at her badge. I'm glad you like it, she said with a slight bow. Like very much. I'm sure the recipient will be absolutely delighted. Thank you, maestro. He carefully took the large bouquet and walked towards the exit of the salon. He came into the salon quite often. Too often for a man and a businessman. This was quite unusual. One day, while selling him the 3rd bouquet in a week, Kristen looked up at him with a smile. You buy flowers so often, she decided to notice. You obviously have many reasons for this. Do you really need a reason to give flowers? I just like to give flowers, he replied, with or without reason. You know, it's like taking colored pencils and coloring a gray sheet. Kristen looked at the man suspiciously, trying to determine if he was mocking her. He uttered very unusual, strange words for a man, especially one who was considered one of the unofficial masters of the city. Flowers are beautiful, and there should be many of them in life. It's true? That's what everyone thinks, don't they? But many people probably think so. But to put these thoughts into practice, frankly speaking, you are the first person on my path who does this. Kristen laughed. Besides, he continued, your salon is very conveniently located between the house where I live and my office building, so we can assume that I come to you on the way home or to work. Well, the last argument is why I began to come here much more often than before. He looked carefully at Kristen. I assume you know it's your work and you. The last words were added very quietly. Kristen flushed, lowered her head, and pretended she hadn't heard. depicting extreme busyness. You know, Kristen, your works still have one big drawback. Kristen raised her head in surprise. Yes. And this flaw migrates from one of your jobs to another. They are all beautiful, but short-lived, alas. And sometimes I want your bouquet to stay with me forever. This one, for example. Do you want me to do it? Would you like me to draw it for you? Suddenly suggested Kristen, who suddenly wanted to pick up brushes and paints until her fingers trembled and she cried. 3 years have passed. On a wonderful May morning, Kristen got up very early and still realized with fear that she was unlikely to have time to do everything that was planned. Today is the day of a grand event that she has dreamed of all her life. Just yesterday she was pleased with how everything was organized, but in the morning she suddenly realized with horror that she needed to change the position of the paintings and put on additional light. On the contrary, several huge windows need to be covered. You definitely need to remove the last 2 pictures. Still, it was not for nothing that she felt that they were not ready yet. Everything had to be perfect, and for this, a lot more needed to be done. It was necessary to call a dozen places, coordinate a huge number of little things, which as usual, came out at the last moment. Despite the fact that today's entire event had been carefully planned and prepared for a long time, it was organized by the best specialists, and yet, it was her business, her life. And only she knew how everything should really be. Today, a personal exhibition Kristen opened at the Central Art Gallery of the city. As experts wrote about her, she is one of the most talented and promising artists of recent times. Well, are you ready for world fame? A huge bouquet of wet, half-bloomed peonies, probably consisting of at least 100 flowers, cautiously entered the room. The bouquet had man's legs. The immense bunch of flowers moved slightly, and from behind it appeared a thin face with a beard and glasses with thin gold frames sitting on his nose. No, I'm not ready, Kristen laughed, feeling her anxiety, worry, and excitement disappear like smoke. She came up and hugged the bouquet, which the man continued to hold in his hands on the other side. Then she moved the delicate, subtly fresh-smelling buds and kissed the cheek that appeared. Kristen, he whispered, I love you and am very proud of you. I love you very much too, George. Thanks for all. A few hours later, Kristen, in a stunning dress, accepted congratulations on the resounding success of her exhibition. A little to the side, squinting in pleasure in the bright light, stood George, her husband, the man thanks to whom her dream became possible. The man who loved her for who she was. After an endless reception, the couple finally got ready to go home and got into the car. Kristen, she suddenly heard. A man in a driver's uniform stood a little to the side. He had a baseball cap on his head. The face was in shadow, but in the figure, in the pose, in the manner of holding her right hand a little back, Kristen felt something very familiar. She looked closely, and a light, sad, barely noticeable smile touched her lips. Wait a minute. Okay? She said in the direction of George, who was already sitting in the car behind the wheel, and moved towards the one who was standing. Andrew, she didn't ask, she said affirmatively. Hello. Hello, he answered hoarsely. I hardly recognized you, but I still recognized you. Well, congratulations. So you achieved your goal, you became queen. He grinned wryly and said, Andrew. No, I just became myself, Kristen smiled.
Meline sighed heavily. Yes, what a family the Adamses are. If I'd seen them from the outside, I'd never have realized what could be going on inside the walls of this house. There was nowhere to go. Almost all the cards had been dealt. I know who you are, you bitch. I know all about you. Nay, Cynthia retorted. Her eyes were bloodshot. Her hands were fumbling around the antique table, trying to find something to throw at the villain. A bird's eye view of the village would make you think that all the houses were printed on a huge printer. All the same similar. Brown roof screen hedges, expensive flower beds, the color of the walls. It was as if the architect, in a bad mood, had decided to make the worst plan for the village and the buildings in his life. Meline looked at the pictures. Paradise Corner. That was the name of the village for rich people who didn't count money. But judging by what had happened there recently, it shouldn't be called that. It should be called Hell's Cauldron. Meline Walker was a well-known detective who had solved many of the tangled stories of in town. She was not at all like a person who possessed nerves of steel and iron grip. But that was only at first glance. The girl graduated from the Pegitsaiskaya Academy in the capital of our homeland, but conquer the criminal case was not in a hurry. It is much more interesting to unravel the intricate tangle of crimes than to write off hangings sitting in the musty room cops. Meline opened her detective agency Eagle Eye recently, helped partner Brandon, a man very stately and in love with Meline. Of course, the girl knew it, but she had her own plans for her life. Brandon was the son of a rich banker, so he was able to rent a room and buy the necessary furniture, supplies, advertising, and a lot of nonsense, without which it is impossible to exist detective agency. Naturally, Brandon's main condition was cooperation. Meline had to dedicate the guy in all matters relating to the investigation of cases. The girl did not like this arrangement, but if she refused, would not be a detective agency Eagle Eye. Meline Walker has successfully solved many cases involving robbery, child abduction, and even murder. Therefore, to the young detective quickly lined up a queue of people who could not find the truth with the help of the police. The other day, Walker received a phone call. The woman's voice in the receiver trembled. Speech was unintelligible, so Meline politely offered to discuss everything on the spot at the agency. The client arrived the same day. She was in mourning, with a tightly tied black scarf on her head, bruises under her eyes, and a pale face. "Good afternoon. My name is Jody. It was me who called you today," the woman said, blowing her nose convulsively into her handkerchief. "I need your help in a very delicate case. The police, unfortunately, couldn't do it. My daughter is dead. Please accept my condolences." Meline said quickly. She picked up a small tape recorder and turned it on. "If you don't mind, I'll record our conversation so I don't miss any details." "Yes, of course. Do as you please." "Meline, you're my last hope. I'm being bribed. I'm being lied to. I can't believe my little girl died of a stroke. She was so young. It's all so strange." "Take your time," said Walker, fixing a stray strand of hair. "Tell the story thoughtfully. Start at the beginning. Would you like some tea or coffee?" "Just water," Jody sobbed. Meline poured water from a carafe and set it in front of the woman. "My Kate has always been a very good girl," Jody began. "She always did well in her studies. She graduated from high school with a gold medal. My husband and I decided to send her to the capital we had plenty of money. Back in the nutties, we opened our own store selling clothes from Turkey. Kate studied diligently. On weekends, she always came home. Everything was fine until she and her friend got to that unfortunate birthday party." "I'll tell you more about that," Meline said. The beginning of the story didn't sound criminal at all. Dorian Smith, one of the town's bigwigs, was having a birthday party. He and his parents live in the Paradise Corner cottage community. My Kate and her friend were also invited. After that party, it was like my daughter was switched. She started dating this Dorian. He turned her head. The thing is, everyone in town knows the kid's a real womanizer. He'll play around, and then he'll dump her. Kate was relentless. She loves him, that's all. I don't care if you're smashed to bits. She started disappearing to the Smith's house a lot. She was terrible with me. She came from him and quarreled with me. One day, Dorian offered Katya a place at his house, and she stupidly agreed. I never saw her alive again." Jody sobbed, her shoulders shaking. "How did it happen? Did the Smiths give you any details? What was the outcome of the autopsy?" Meline asked. The story was taking a very mysterious turn. The official cause of death was a stroke. But what kind of stroke could a young, healthy girl have? My Kate was an athlete with a perfectly healthy heart. I'm sure Dorian had something to do with my little girl's death, and I want justice," Jody finished loudly. She took out her handkerchief again, wet with tears, and wiped her nose with it. Then she sipped some water from the glass and continued. "The police, the Smiths, must have been bribed because they didn't consider anything other than a stroke. The case was closed. But I don't believe the official version. Help me, please, and I'll thank you well," Jody said. Walker was silent for a moment. "Yes, it's an interesting case, but it was worth taking on to unravel another tangle. What if the girl did die of some other... All right, I'll take the case. I'll need all the information you have on file after the police investigation, all the references, Kate's friends and girlfriends, and half the money for my work. Meline wrote the cost of her service on a piece of paper, and Jody nodded affirmatively. I'll see you at the agency day after tomorrow. With all the paperwork, she replied. When Jody left, Meline quickly opened her laptop and began to look for information about the Smiths. A wealthy family, Dorian's mother and father are the founders of the bank. The son is a major who spends money left and right. And here's the mother's social media page. Margaret Smith. In the photo posed statuesque and very beautiful woman with an imperious look. It was Margot's gaze that mesmerized and frightened at the same time. Walker left the agency building well past midnight. All this time she had been making a plan of action and investigation. But all the paths led to one dead end. There are no documents on the official version of the investigation yet. We have to wait. The phone in her pocket vibrated. It was Brandon. Where do you go? The man yelled cheerfully. I just got home from work, Meline said tiredly. What do you want? Oh, so we'll be investigating a new case soon. Brandon's voice sounded solemn. I've been waiting for you in the driveway for hours, Walker sighed. Several times a month, Brandon liked to go for a nice walk to get away from everything. He and Meline went to the most expensive clubs and restaurants, and the guy left almost 2 months' salary of a regular accountant in those places. Oh God, today is such a day. He's going to drag me out again, Walker guessed. She had a bad headache and she wanted to sleep. Brandon, I feel so bad. It's been such a hard day, Meline began, but the boy interrupted her. No excuses. You have to come to the club with me. Your favorite band is playing there tonight. The girl grimaced to herself. It was a good thing Brandon hadn't called via video link. He wouldn't have liked the disgruntled look on Walker's face. Okay, she said, but not for long. Dictate the address, and I'll pick you up. He mumbled satisfactorily. Morning knocked lazily on the window. Meline got up quickly. Her head was buzzing. Last night's rest at the club had taken its toll. Brandon was lying next to her with his hands behind his head, smiling broadly. Hey, how are you? You know how to relax. You'll see later. I took a picture of you on my phone. What you did on the bar last night. Walker moaned loudly. OHHOU, I told you I can't use. It was worth it for a night like this. We didn't have anything. Meline looked down at the blanket in horror. Thank God my pajamas were still in place. No, of course not. Brandon's eyebrows rose in surprise. Though you're attractive as hell, it would be a sin to use your body in such a deplorable state. I just took you in a cab, put you to bed, and kept watch to make sure you didn't do anything else. You bully. Brandon pecked Meline on the cheek and went into the kitchen to find something for breakfast. Walker slowly picked up her phone, found the latest videos and photos. Oh, Brandon, that's some ready-made dirt. Here's her chasing a dancer off the pylon and trying to strip dance, and further knocking bottles off the bar with her beautiful stiletto. The last photo caught my eye. It shows Brandon, Meline, and another guy with a girl. The young man's face looked familiar. Brandon, come here a minute. Walker called out to him. He came into the bedroom carrying a large tray. There was a glass of soda on the tray, and croissants and coffee. Mr. Antipo Meline to the rescue. Brandon raised one fist up in a funny, heroic Brandon. Tell me, who's in this picture? Meline put the phone in her boyfriend's hands. Oh, that's my friend Dorian Smith and his new girlfriend. You danced with him last night too. Honey, don't you remember anything? Meline shrugged her shoulders. Brandon, showing his perfect white teeth, laughed loudly. Her head began to buzz again. Walker rummaged through her bedside table and found an aspirin. Sipped some soda. Now we'd have to wait for the pain to go away. Then breakfast. The thing is, a woman came to see me yesterday. She's the mother of Dorian's ex-girlfriend. Her daughter died under unclear circumstances. I've decided to take over the case. You haven't heard anything about it by any chance? Wow, Brandon exhaled and rubbed his hands together. No, Meline aspirin. I know that his ex-girlfriend's a horse's ass, but that's about it. Kate's mother's supposed to bring in the deceased's paperwork any day now. She and I have agreed on a pretty good sum for my services. I just don't know where to start. There's not a lot of information about the Smith family on social media. As a friend of Dorian's, Do you have anything useful? Alas, sweetheart. The Smiths are very careful about what they show in public and what they keep in the back of the closet. Unless you live with their family, you won't be able to solve this dead girl mystery. What am I supposed to do now? Meline became visibly sad. What would you do without me? Brandon smiled slyly. You are terribly lucky. Recently, Dimka's mother kicked out of the mansion another housekeeper. We can try to find her through a recruitment agency for rich majors, but the mistress must like you. Otherwise, your whole business will be over. Cynthia and her husband like everything neat and tidy. I was lucky enough to be in their house once. Everything was in order, not a speck of dust in. You don't think she'll realize I'm a sitting duck? Of course it's a good idea. The main thing is to get into the house, gain her trust, and then we can investigate. So what do you say? Shall we try it? Brandon asked her. He was already devouring the scones from the tray. Meline hurried to join him. All right, but I've got to talk it over with Jody first, Walker said, and get copies of the documents. Maybe I'll find something interesting in there. My head was almost gone. The croissant smelled so appetizing that the young people ate every last one. Turns out you can be useful. Big boy, Meline thought and smiled to herself. It didn't take long for Jody to arrive. The next day, she brought copies of all the certificates and documents to the Eagle Eye Agency. Walker, wearing her fancy gold-rimmed glasses, read the contents in detail. It's all very strange. She snapped her fingertips. Judging by the autopsy results, she should have had heart problems long ago. You say she was more than fine. Jody exclaimed. Kate never complained about her health. Did the police really get paid? And how much money did it take to get the honest justice officials to cover up a sensitive case? Thought Walker. Meline initiated the woman into her future plans. Jody was surprised and dumbfounded by this turn of events, but Walker assured her that everything should go well, Meline said. And Jody breathed a sigh of relief. If I get into the settlement, you and I probably won't be able to see each other very often. Whether the Smith family's phone calls are monitored is also a mystery. Wait for my call. Don't call me yourself. If anything, I don't know you. You've never met me. Jody nodded affirmatively. The next morning, an excited Brandon was ringing Meline's doorbell. I've made an appointment with the secretary of the Lily of the Valley. That's where Cynthia recruits most of her staff, he said as Walker poured coffee into cups. She was preoccupied with something, and the boy noticed it. What if something goes wrong? What if they find out I'm not who I say I am? Don't pretend to be. Don't worry, I'll try to visit Dimka more often to make sure you're safe. Remember, the most important thing is that all the household believes that you are a real housekeeper with experience. Pack your bags, no time to waste, or they'll hire someone else to take your place. Brandon helped Meline to pack everything she needed, quickly packed a suitcase in the trunk of his foreign car, and they rushed down the busy road. The Lily of the Valley Agency was one of the most elite places to hire a maid with a lot of experience and specialized training. Brandon handed Meline a fake certificate of completion of a housewife's course and references from a previous job. Study this thoroughly so you won't get into any trouble when the landlady asks, he advised. But how did you? Don't ask. Moore smiled Brandon. EI promised the pretty secretary a wonderful evening at the swankiest restaurant in town. So you owe me. The boy winked. Meline raised her eyebrows in surprise. Sometimes Brandon can be quite the help. She thought and started reading her resume. O.B. Garrison, born in 1991, graduated from special education in Washington, D.C., was a housekeeper for a family. Everything swam in front of her eyes. She's O.B. Garrison now. That's great. I have to learn to respond to that name so they don't notice the switch. Where is O.B. now? She asked Brandon thoughtfully. She went to her relatives in TV and got pregnant by her master. So the case was hushed up and she was sent away, so as not to spoil the reputation of the rich family. Meline shuddered. Not a good start, but a detective should be able to do everything, even work under someone else's name. She'd promised Jean she'd find the truth. All right, Obie, are you ready? Did you read the questionnaire? Cynthia's gonna be here any minute. You're gonna have to do something to make her choose you. Meline asked. Are there any other candidates? Of course. Ain't answered Brandon. You have 5 more charming young girls. I suggest you change into a more modest outfit and put your hair in a tight bun Cynthia likes order. Meline quickly changed her clothes and did as the boy advised. Half an hour later, the rich mistress was already at the agency. Cynthia changed housekeepers like gloves, so the other girls said. Medeline's heart dropped. Come on, think of something to make her hire you. She screamed inside. The secretary of the Lily of the Valley agency asked the girls to line up in a straight line. When the woman entered the room, Meline knew at a glance who she was. Cynthia, tall and slender, had a commanding and magnetic look. Her voice was loud and commanding. She stopped in front of the potential housekeepers and asked the receptionist for all the girls' resumes. Cynthia studied the papers for a long time, then looked up sharply and said, I've chosen. Who is Monica Wiggins? That's it. That's it. What am I supposed to do? Medeline's eyes raced. I've got it, Cynthia. May I speak to you? You're making a big mistake hiring that housekeeper. Walker stepped forward and continued. I used to work in the same big mansion with Sidorova. I'll tell you, she's been stealing groceries and taking them out of the village more than once. The girls gasped and whispered. And Sidorova, white with anger, cried out, she's lying. I didn't steal anything. I have an excellent reputation, but Cynthia paid no attention to Monica. Her scrutinizing gaze rested on Meline. Are you Harrison? I've never seen you in this agency before. And you look better than the others. Okay, you'll work for me. We'll see what happens. Maybe you're the one stealing, and you're the one who told on your friend. Cynthia smiled broadly, revealing large white teeth. Monica whispered curses, but Walker didn't care. Her plan had come to fruition. Now the main thing was not to give herself away. The hostess talked to the secretary for a few more minutes, then nodded to Meline and headed for the exit. Walker, showing her tongue to the other girls, quickly picked up her heavy suitcase and followed Cynthia. A luxury car of the latest model was waiting for her at the exit. Meline was about to open the doors, but Cynthia stopped her with a wave of her hand. You're taking a different car. The servants aren't allowed to ride with the owners. The exception is our... You can't say anything, Meline thought, and looked around. Obie Harrison, was being called by a handsome man. Meline drove to the Paradise Corner settlement in a domestically made ramshackle car. My name is Reese. The man introduced himself. Looking at Meline in the rearview mirror, it's nice to see new faces in our home. I hope you're familiar with our hostess's personality. UAC sharp. OBI, replied the girl. UA judging by her appearance. She is very... You're right. Reese winked. I'd advise you not to fall for her son. If you go missing, your family won't find you. He was suddenly silent, and they rode in silence the rest of the way. Paradise Corner was closely guarded. You couldn't just walk through. A wide and long fence led along the entire territory of the cottage village. At the entrance were 2 guards in full armor. Meline memorized everything carefully. Wow, you've got a lot of security here, she said to Reese. He nodded affirmatively. The villagers don't like uninvited guests. Every visitor is registered in a book. The guards have the book, so don't try to escape. They won't let you out that easily. Reese smiled, and Meline didn't know if he was joking or telling the truth. But the whole thing is creepy. The house stopped in the backyard of a posh mansion. The house looked like an old castle, tall towers, peculiar masonry walls. Meline froze for a moment at the entrance. The house amazed her. She had only seen such buildings in pictures of children's fairy tales. Reese gently pushed Meline toward the entrance and wished her good luck. Walker hesitantly entered the building. How chic and expensive everything was. What a huge kitchen. Marble floors, mirrored ceilings. Suddenly, a strong hand grabbed her shoulder. Cynthia, the woman, led Meline into the parlor where the rest of the servants were already lined up. Walker scrutinized the even formation of 2 guards, 3 drivers, a fat cook, a laundress, and a housekeeper. A Wiccan wore the same uniform, a white bonnet, a dark brown dress with a sheer lace apron. On their feet were black patent shoes without heels. The guards and drivers wore blue overalls and the same patent shoes. All looked sternly downward, hesitating to raise their eyes to the hostess and the new girl. And Cynthia, smiling contentedly, introduced Meline. Honored ones, there's a new member of your friendly staff today. Please love and welcome Obie Garrison. She'll be replacing our previous housekeeper. Yeah, sure. And Dimitri's gonna have some fun too. Fresh meat, the sullen cook muttered. Everyone nodded their heads. So, you know very well that such talk will get you fired without reinstatement. Cynthia's voice suddenly changed from honey-colored to dry and commanding. Peggy, will you come to my office after lunch? Cynthia said, glaring at the cook. Peggy seemed to realize what the management was going to talk to her about, so she quickly squared her head and looked down at the floor. Meline looked around curiously at the staff. The guards were all well-built, pumped up, slim, and stern. The cook and laundress were like twins, equally plump, with kind eyes. The housekeeper is like an old mantis, a dried-up and decrepit woman on the threshold of old age. But the housekeeper's unkind look did not please the girl. Please show Obi to her room. Cynthia said to the housekeeper. Give her the linens and tell her duties. Obi, when you've laid out your things and changed into your uniform, come and see me to discuss your salary. But my salary was already set at the agency where you hired me, Walker wondered. There's something wrong, of course, Cynthia said wryly. But we haven't talked about additional services. Don't waste time. Go to your room and get changed. Muse, take her upstairs. Cynthia waved to the rest of the staff, a gesture that obviously meant the introductions were over. Seems like getting acquainted and figuring things out here is going to be very difficult. Well, nothing. We'll see, thought Meline as she climbed the steep spiral staircase upstairs. The muse showed the girl to her small room. It was more like a closet because it was in the attic part of the house. There was an old iron bed, a chest of drawers, and a desk with a chair by the window. Nothing else. You can stay here, Obi. Martha said politely, pointing to the bed. And the laundress will bring your laundry. Keep it clean and change it as needed. You will ask our hostess any questions you may have when you're clean. We say, Muse, I don't know your middle name. Muse Scott. I'll say, Muse Scott. Is it customary here to address a stranger as you? The old housekeeper pressed her lips together. You know, Obi, only the strongest of spirits endure here. Cynthia is a very wise woman, and she keeps only a select few around her. I've served her faithfully for over 15 years, and in all that time, she has never questioned my courtesy or the proper treatment of her servants. Not once has she ever punished me. So, girl, it's not for you to tell me how to treat anyone. Muse Scott turned abruptly and disappeared out the door. Meline stood with the suitcase by the dresser. Oh, wow, she said to herself. What a place to live. When she had laid out her things and made her bed, she put on the uniform that the courteous washerwoman had brought her. Without a word, the woman placed the clothes on the bed, nodded, and disappeared like a shadow. The servants here walked silently. That meant that anything could definitely happen in this mansion. Insidious scheming, deceit, treason, and murder. Maybe more than one. Like, where did the old housekeeper go? So, Obi, how do you like our house? Thanks, but I've only been in my room so far. But I'm sure it's gorgeous and very old. Yes, it's beautiful. It used to belong to my great-grandmother. During World War II, the Nazis took it over, but after the German army was defeated, the house survived. I didn't invite you into my office to discuss your job duties. You already know them. Meline knew them. To keep the house clean, to clean the household, to set the table before meals, to serve the mistress and her family. By the way, where's Cynthia and Dorian's husband? You probably know that we are the owners of a huge inheritance. We keep our valuables safe and don't show our lives to the common people. Jetty, Cynthia began. Her voice sounded assertive. That's why you should know that any gossip about our family is a direct way to be reprimanded and fired. All phone calls are tapped, keep that in mind. In general, anything you see or hear here must stay within the walls of the house. Now about the business. I wanted to offer you an extra income. You will have to inform about the condition of all my subordinates. Are you suggesting that I snitch on my co-workers? The girl asked bluntly. Why are you being so harsh? The hostess smiled wryly. Not to snitch, but to share the mood of the staff with me. I should know what's being said behind my back. Of course. You just want me to be a snitch. You sly toad, Walker thought, and answered, Am I allowed to think? Of course, Cynthia said. I didn't expect such a quick answer. Think it over, and then you and I will make a deal, Smith smiled. But Meline saw something devilish and unkind in that smile. Now you may begin your duties. Go to Muse Scott and get what you need for your work." When Meline left, Cynthia exhaled deeply and said to herself, "Either she's stupid or she's too smart. It's okay, Obi, I'll find out who you really are." Brandon called her at midnight. He promised he'd come to visit Dimitri soon. Dorian Smith arrived home late. He was drunk. Dorian's father showed up after midnight. Meline heard Cynthia screaming and cursing. The tired girl fell asleep in the morning. "Meh. Peggy, what's the matter?" Cynthia yelled. You've overdried the meat again. Maybe it's time to replace you. Get out of my sight, you brainless bitch." Peggy picked up the pieces of roast that were lying on the floor, picked up a tray, and whirled out of the dining room. Dorian chuckled at the sight of such a scene. He obviously found this morning's squabble funny. He looked at Meline and his eyes lit up. Vincent, Cynthia's husband, sniffled unhappily as he looked at his wife. "Oh, honey, can't you get off your butt sometimes and cook something yourself?" He asked his wife calmly. "No, Daddy, she can't. Mom's too busy lying on the couch." Cynthia pounded her fist on the table. "Hey, son, you know that. I'm sick right now." "Mom, you're always sick." "Well, I'm going to go. Wait for us to visit tonight." The hostess changed her face. "You asked who? Who else are you going to bring?" Dorian was very much like his mother. That's why he liked to annoy her. His new girlfriend. "You don't dare bring your new prostitute here." Her mother shrieked and her hands shook. Vincent tried to calm her down, but it was in vain. "I dare you. You've got the old one down, but you wouldn't dare treat the new one like that. Believe me." Dorian finished his coffee and left the dining room. Meline looked up at him curiously as she cleaned up the grease from the roast. What was he talking about? Who was swatting who? Dorian winked at her and slammed the front door. There was the sound of a car engine slowly moving away. Darling, Cynthia sobbed. I can't go on like this. Sweetheart, let's go to the bedroom. I'll give you something to calm you down." Vincent took his wife under his arm and they went into one of the back rooms. When Cynthia's husband came out, Meline was cleaning the hallway. "You didn't hear anything this morning. Do you understand me?" he hissed, looking Meline in the eye. Patience invited not to argue. "Oh, of course, Vincent. I didn't hear anything. Everything was fine. You had breakfast and went about your business?" "Oh, good girl," growled the satisfied host. He got dressed and left for work. Walker had been working at the Smith house for 2 months. In that time, she had gotten to know the rest of the servants. Muse Scott, a stern-looking housekeeper, turned out to be a very simple-minded woman. She liked the outdoors, and Meline often asked to go for walks in the park with her. "You know, I don't have a mother. You look just like her," Meline sobbed, and Muse Scott's heart melted. She became more attached to the housekeeper, and Meline could thus learn all the information about the Smith family members. Peggy, a longtime cook, had disliked Meline from the first day. Walker recognized the woman's weak spot. Peggy liked expensive alcohol. Therefore, the girl, in one of the cloudy evenings, visited the room where the cook lived and treated her with expensive cognac. The brandy was brought by Meline Brandon. The plump cook told Walker that strange things were happening in the mansion. All of Dorian's girls are dying in a strange way, of heart attacks, but Peggy didn't believe it. She thought that the girls are killed by the son of the mistress himself, and the mother and father cover up the atrocities of their child. Meline decided to herself that Peggy was the main ear of the house, so the cook must always be kept on the hook. The fat and pitiful laundress, Maiji, worked in the basement and rarely came out. Meline had a bad rapport with her, but she knew from Peggy Walker that Mary had a daughter and had worked in the house before. Then she had died under strange circumstances. Meiji was quiet and didn't share her life story with the guards. Had little interest in Meline, but Walker knew they were probably the main witnesses who might know the truth about what was happening to the girls in the mansion. There would have to be a clever way to collect the camera footage. One of the men, Daniel, was younger than the others. He could be approached. How Walker hadn't figured out yet. The drivers, Ireland and Wendy Whitewater, were twins, and Meline often confused. Brandon began coming to the Smith house more often, and he and Dorian would play pool or watch movie premieres. He and Meline learned to communicate on the phone with the help of a special cipher. Some words were replaced by others, but the meaning of the information could be grasped. Brandon, in turn, was interested in the affairs and life of Dorian. Meline never agreed to Cynthia's additional income. The landlady did not appreciate such a decision. From the servants, Walker learned that the mistress gave such an offer to each of the workers of the house, but no one dared to take such a step. Whistleblowers are not liked. Snitches are quietly put away. Every day of her life in the Smith house, the detective recorded on a small dictaphone. It was necessary to filter information and memorize every little thing. Also, the cunning housekeeper was able to install several tiny recording cameras when she cleaned the rooms of the owners and doors. The main thing was to make sure that no one noticed the peepholes. The first plans had come to fruition. Now it was necessary to gain the trust of the young guard. Madeline's thoughts were interrupted by loud laughter. Dorian walked into the hallway, holding the hand of a young girl. She was dressed in an expensive mink coat and leather boots. Meline had a good eye for quality things. "Oh, hello, Bunny." Dorian waved cheerfully. Get the table ready. I'm going to introduce Mom and Dad to my future wife." Meline smelled the odor of alcohol coming from the boy. "You've got to keep your eyes open now." Cynthia slowly entered the hallway. Her head was covered with a tight towel, for she had been unwell all day. Vincent had returned from work early today and was sitting in his study, but the shouting and noise in the hallway forced his master to come downstairs. "Dory, what are you doing here?" he asked, sighing noisily. "Mother's been in bed with headaches since this morning. Take the young lady home and we'll get acquainted tomorrow." I wouldn't think of it." Dorian shouted cheerfully. If you don't want to get acquainted today, the young lady will sleep at our house and we'll get acquainted at breakfast." She smiled politely at Cynthia and Vincent Taylor. The host looked at Meline with a murderous look, and she realized what she had to do. "OBA, tell Peggy not to put alcohol on the table." Cynthia whispered to Meline, "Tell Peggy to put more alcohol on the table. We're having a party tonight. Right, honey?" The girl smiled fearfully and nodded. Cynthia motioned to go into the dining room. The woman was pale and often clung to her temples. Vincent sat down at the head of the table with a stone face. The newcomer was not welcome in this house. Meline was carrying the dishes and overhearing the Smiths' conversation. "Honey, don't worry. We'll get her out of here in no time." Vincent whispered to "It's not the way I'd like it to be today. I don't think I'll survive 1 minute with that prostitute." Cynthia hissed. Where did he pick her up? Or Doreen, red with either joy or drink, tended to his girlfriend in the hallway. Meline helped him hang up his clothes. Dorian's new fling was very pretty and sophisticated. I wouldn't have thought she looked like a girl of easy virtue. Probably a person of high society. Dorian's girlfriend, maybe. Meline took out her tape recorder and quietly placed it on the mantel, covering it with a framed photograph. "Okay, great. Now we don't have to worry about any information floating past our ears." Meanwhile, dinner was served and everyone gathered around the table. Meline stood a little farther back behind her host's backs to carry the dirty plates into the kitchen. "Mommy." Doreen began. "My dear, let me introduce you to my new wife-to-be. Her name is Lexi. She's very rich, so can you please leave your barbs behind and accept my choice for once in your life?" Lexi was obviously feeling a little out of place. She blushed thickly and looked at Dorian expressively. But he continued as if nothing had happened. "Oh, Mother, she's going to live with us. Since I am the heir to this house, I have the right to decide who lives here. Daddy, you won't let Mom hurt my fiancé, will you? Like she did to Kate?" "Shut up," Vincent yelled. His face darkened and he slammed the plate down hard. It shattered and fell to the floor. Meline hurried to pick up the pieces. Whoa, things are starting to take a turn for the worse. Jody, Kate's mother, thinks her daughter was killed by Dorian, but maybe there's more to it than meets the eye. "Dad, don't scare Lexi." Dorian began in a hurt tone, "But son, you're scaring your fiancé. Why would she tell you about your ex-girlfriend, who didn't lead a very decent life, cheating on you with a security guard? Lexi comes from a very intelligent and respectable family. Honey, have dinner with us." Cynthia, with an anaconda's gaze, began to put meat and potatoes on her guest's plate. "Lexi, thank you, Cynthia, but I don't eat that much. I'm watching my figure. Doreen doesn't like fat people." Cynthia smiled wryly and whispered to Meline, "Go to Peggy's kitchen and help her decorate the dessert." It's clear. The hostess doesn't want any extra ears in the dining room. Meline smiled and went out. The dictaphone will record everything. It was hot in the kitchen. Peggy was sitting at the table drinking tea. Did you bring another victim? The woman grinned. Do you want tea? Cynthia sent me to help decorate the dessert, Meline said. Peggy raised an eyebrow in surprise. Oh, it's been done for a long time. Come sit down and we'll talk. Meline sat down at the table. Peggy began. She came to change the linen in your room and found something. The woman held out her palm to Meline. There was a bug on the palm, apparently lost when Walker pulled out the baggie with the tiny cameras. How could she be so sloppy? But I had to find a way out of it. I don't know. Probably a camera, Meline shrugged. But Peggy continued her questioning. Oh, I can see it's a spy camera. How did it get in your room? Oh, I guess the owners wanted to test my honesty, so they put it there. Walker tried to evade. Do you think I'm a fool, girl? The cook smiled. I can see from your face that you're not a housekeeper for hire. You don't know how to clean professionally. You don't know how to serve the owners. Who are you and where did you come from? Tell me, or I'll have to tell my guesses to the owners. Peggy poured herself more tea and looked questioningly at Walker. What's to be done? How could I have blundered like this? Because of my busy work schedule, I forgot to change the laundry myself. What else could the laundress have seen in there? Meline pondered chaotically, but there was nowhere to go. Peggy could really tell the owners, and then the whole plan would fail. We have to tell the truth. Yes, you're right. Walker said after a moment. I'm not who I say I am, but I didn't get here by accident. I'm investigating the mysterious death of Kate, Dorian's ex-girlfriend. She recently passed away right here in the house. The girl's mother doesn't believe Kate could have died of a stroke. Her daughter was perfectly healthy. And my name isn't Obi. It's Meline. Meline walked. Wow, Peggy whistled. Why didn't you tell me about yourself before? Meline looked at the woman in surprise. Logic was definitely not Peggy's strong suit. I didn't know anything about you. You could have turned me in, and then I would never have known the truth about the murder. The cook looked at Meline very carefully, questioning whether or not to believe the story. Suddenly, she said excitedly, Walker, I know you. I've heard about your agency many times. Brendan, Dorian, Meline nodded in agreement. Yes, Brendan and I have decided that I need to infiltrate the Smith mansion itself and find out all the facts. I need all the security tapes. Maybe they have Kate's murder on them, but there's no way I can gain the trust of any of them. I've known Cynthia and her husband for years. They could be hiding their son's evil deeds. Doreen's strange too, changing girls like a glove. How many girls has the Smith son had, and all of them disappearing in the middle of nowhere? Fuck off, Peggy exclaimed delightedly, but Meline shushed her. The Smiths might have heard. Peggy, you must promise me you won't tell anyone. Not about me and my business. Not even the washerwoman. No one but us can know who I really am. Swear it. Come on, darling. I'll never give you up. I promise to help you with your case. I too feel sorry for all the girls of that young tyrant. There were so many of them, all from rich families. Where they disappeared to, I don't know, but Cynthia never accepted any potential bride into her family. Just the air in the dining room was tense. Lightning seemed to fly from Cynthia's eyes. Vincent stared blankly at the ceiling. The girl served dessert. She managed to sneak over to the fireplace and took out a tape recorder. She wondered what they were talking about. When dinner was over, Meline quickly cleaned up the dining room and hurried to her room. In her hand, she clutched the dictaphone. But when the girl entered the bedroom, she shrieked in surprise. On the bed sat Dorian. Hello, little birdie, he said, and smiled. Meline froze at the door. What was he doing here? After all, the girl had seen with her own eyes how he, along with Lexi, had gone to his apartment. What does he want? Don't shake. I came to you with an offer. You see, my mother is in a bad mood about my new girlfriend again. I'll make you a deal. You tell me everything you hear about me and Lexi from my parents, and I'll pay you good money. Deal. Meline sighed. Mother and son are the same, and if Cynthia finds out, she won't. Dory moved closer to Meline and patted the girl on the cheek. If you don't tell, I hope you're smart. I am a grave. It's not in my interest to spoil myself in the mansion. All right, I'll give it a try. Yue Walker sighed. How just in time is all this? Dorian winked happily and quickly left the bedroom. The girl closed the door tightly, lay down with her head under the blanket. and turned on the recorder. Dorian, how nice of you to bring such a young lady into the house again. Lexi, do you like it here? Your pants aren't too tight after dinner. Cynthia's voice sounded. I'm fine, thank you. Lexi answered confidently and without a tremor in her voice. I really like your cozy home. I live downtown and this cottage community is my first time in this area. Your house really stands out from the others. I hope when you come to my parents' house to meet them, you'll appreciate our mansion too. Oh, honey, I hope that won't happen. It was the landlady again. Her voice was lusciously, Mommy, take it easy. If you want to see your little boy home once in a while, don't make me have to pack my bags and leave home again. The recorder was silent for a minute. Then there was a sob. Dorian, don't say that. Let Lexi stay with us as long as she wants. You just, okay, Mommy, calm down. I'm not going anywhere. Dad will probably go to our place. Cynthia shakes. Stop it, sweetheart. I hate her already. If you only knew. I hate all of them. They want to take everything from Dorian. And our money. My dear, come on. I'll give you a pill. Footsteps sounded, and the recorder turned off. So much for the recording, Meline thought for a moment. Strange. Cynthia has strong nerves, but something had clearly happened at dinner that had thrown the mistress of the mansion off balance. We must get to the bottom of this, only very carefully. There was a persistent knock at the door. Meline wasn't expecting anyone. Who? Open up, Meline. It's Peggy. Walker let the woman into the room and locked the door. Peggy, please don't shout my name all over the floor. They could hear you. The girl shouted angrily. I'm sorry. I'm stupid. The woman whimpered. I have a plan to get the security tapes. The whole house. HSDNT. Ow, come on, tell me. Peggy took Meline's hands. It's simple. Daniel, one of the guards, is head over heels in love with you. He confessed it to me the other day when he was having lunch in the kitchen. He's been asking me all sorts of questions about how to approach you. This is our chance. Just reciprocate. Meline sighed and sat down on the bed. Playing with love is no joke. It could end very sadly, but it was worth a try. It was a magical winter morning. The first thin snow fell and covered the frozen ground with its lace. The spirit of the upcoming new year was in the sky. City Paradise Corner was slowly being dressed up. In some houses, the workers were already working at full speed. They put on the roofs and walls of houses LED ribbons, installed figures of snowmen, Santa Claus. The Smith mansion already stood dressed up. The towers were decorated with lights on the windows, elegant lace patterns made of special paper. Meline took an active part in all this pre-holiday bustle and even for a moment forgot that she was a detective under a false name. During this time, the Smith house had become her home. Meline had been nursing the idea of a relationship for a long time, until one day Daniel himself talked to the girl when they went to town to buy groceries. The housekeeper was contractually obligated to go shopping with an escort. The guard had apparently asked for it. Nice weather, isn't it? He asked, looking in the rearview mirror. Meline looked straight into the guy's eyes. They were like two hypnotic circles, drawing him inward. Oh, great. I love winter. The girl answered honestly. The driver, Edgar Stanley, smiled slyly. He switched the wave on the radio. You're not like the other housekeepers were. Daniel was still looking thoughtfully in the mirror. There's something special about you. Yeah, of course there is. I'm just not who I think I am, that's all. Big deal. Meline's heart was aflame. He answered aloud. I don't know any former housekeepers. But I can tell you that I'm not very good at cleaning. Daniel smiled. They drove the rest of the way to the center in complete silence. Only the music from the stereo disturbed the peace. Edgar Stanley lit a cigarette and opened the window a little. A stream of cool but refreshing air rushed. Meline sighed with pleasure. Daniel glanced at the girl the whole way. At the center, all the Paradise Corner housekeepers bought their groceries from only one single high-end store, Adam and Eve. The first time Meline saw the sign, she laughed heartily. How had she never noticed this storefront before? After all, she'd been to the market 1,000 times. And to miss such a name, I wonder who had gotten the idea. Poor Adam and Eve would have rolled over in their graves for the 1,000th time. But today Meline didn't even look at the sign. She stared into the crowd. Oh no! Jody was staring at her. Now she was going to give Walker away. Jody waved her arms at Meline. "Who's that?" "Someone you know," Danielle asked sympathetically. Meline begged Jody with one eye. "Please don't say my name. Just walk past me, please." The woman caught Walker's pleading gaze, nodded affably to the guard, and disappeared into the crowd. Meline exhaled loudly. "Whew, she almost got hooked like a huge fish. Gotta be more careful." Daniel said to hurry up, and they entered the Adam and Eve store. Wandering by the grocery shelves, Meline kept feeling Daniel's breath on her neck. It was time for this to stop. The girl turned around abruptly. She met the boy's eyes and read the devotion and love in them. "Shall we go for a walk in the park tonight? When we finish our work?" The boy murmured. "I don't mind." Meline replied politely. She didn't want to cheat the guard's feelings, but sacrifices had to be made for the cause. If she pretended to be in love, she would have access to all the information she needed. First finds a Daniel smiled and took Medeline's hand. "That's so cute, just like high school." Walker's first love had been just as naive. Her classmate had been hesitant to approach Meline, but she was the first to tell him how she felt. And as in all the famous fairy tales, all should have lived happily ever after, but not so. Turns out a classmate had bet his friend to win Meline over. Oh, she cried so hard. Apparently, the first unhappy love left its bitter traces in Walker's soul. She could not meet anyone for more than 6 months. Now it's a relationship game. In the evening, Daniel was waiting for the girl at the entrance. He was holding a modest bouquet of roses. The flowers gave off a great fragrance. Strangely, the roses were not like the ones sold in flower stores. They didn't smell so strong. Cynthia grows these flowers herself. She was kind enough to cut a few sprigs for me. "Here you go," Danielle said happily. "Thank you," replied Meline, who was blushing. They walked slowly down the path to the park. "Danielle, I'm sorry to be blunt, but I don't quite understand what's going on at the mansion. Cynthia and Vincent seemed like a very intelligent couple at first, until I met their son, Dorian. It's like he's deliberately pissing off his parent." "Why would he do that?" "Dorian has nothing to spare. Fly to the islands, buy all the fancy cars in town. He's got the girls all ready to fall at his feet." "You were looking at him too," Daniel said. "It's my job to keep an eye on everyone." "Well, you've been watching him, and he sees that and he's flirting. Aren't you afraid of being in the shoes of all the other girls?" The guard's words startled Walker. "What does he mean?" "No, you're imagining things. I look at everyone like that," Meline mumbled, trying to change this. The rest of the walk they talked about unimportant things. Their plans for New Year's Eve, their hobbies. Meline found it hard to make up Obi's story. I wonder how the young man would behave if he found out that it was not Obi's housekeeper, but young Detective Meline Walker. Probably ratted out the landlady. Daniel led Meline to the front of the mansion and said goodbye. "Would you like me to show you where I live and work next time?" he asked. Bingo. I didn't even have to make up an excuse to get into his den and see where the hard disks were and stealthily take them, and then find a place where you can rewrite the information to disk. "That would be great," the girl replied. She let Daniel kiss her cheek. Meline went into her bedroom and laid her head on her pillow tiredly. Then she dialed Brandon's number. "Hello, Meline. Is that you?" A voice mumbled sleepily. "You see what time it is?" "My, Brandon, the bird is almost in the cage," said the girl. "We need a few more days and we will catch it." The voice on the other end of the line said, "Good for you," she said. "Call me if you need anything." Meline hung up the phone and was about to doze off, but her peace was interrupted by shrieks down. "You bastard, how dare you!" Cynthia screamed in a fit. She was in her pink nightdress, her bonnet pulled down over her hair. The landlady's face was blue from screaming. Vincent held Cynthia, preventing her from attacking Lexi. Michi stood nearby. "I won't let you hurt the girl." The laundress said in a trembling voice and covered the girl with her body. Vitally, "Let me go. I'll show her now." "Where did you take my son, you bitch?" Why? Lexi sobbed and hid behind the laundress' broad back. Meline could see Peggy's worried face through the narrow slit of the door. "Okay?" The landlady yelled next. "Get the hell out of my house. Stop wasting my money. Don't ever set foot here again. I'll give you 1 minute." She's not going anywhere. said Michi sharply. Your son has knocked up the poor girl. She's pregnant. It's your son who should be kicked out. He should not spoil any more young girls. How much longer are you going to abuse? You know I won't have to tell the police what you did to your son's previous girlfriend. Get out. Ooh, ooh, Cynthia shouted. The door of the mansion opened abruptly. Dorian flew in. Surprisingly, he was sober. Meline felt as if she had to stop him. She put her arm around Cynthia. Dorian, calm down. But the guy didn't hear her. He shoved Meline roughly away, causing her to fall to the floor and hurt. All she remembered was Peggy's tear-stained face and Daniel's eyes, then darkness. Meline woke up in her room with her head tightly bandaged. Muse Scott was sitting beside her. Lie down, my good girl. Ooh, she said, adjusting the blanket. You need to rest. You hit your head hard on the sharp corner of the stairs, but you're all right now. They called a doctor and he stitched up your head. Just lie down and rest. If you need anything, call me on the phone. I'll be right over. What about the others? Meline interrupted her. She felt the bump on her head and wrinkled her nose. Where are Dorian and Lexi? Cynthia? Miji? Cynthia's in her room with her husband. Thank goodness that you fell and passed out. It stopped the family fight. I don't know what would have happened if that hadn't happened. Dorian and Lexi are in their wing. Of course, I'm in shock that she's in the position. What's going to happen now? And Miji? What about her? Muse Scott lowered her gaze. The laundress, unfortunately, was kicked out immediately. They wouldn't even let her pack her bags. Now you're the one who has to stand up for yourself. You should have used your head. Oh, that's terrible. She was protecting Lexi. Cynthia could have hit that girl. Honey, the old housekeeper interrupted her, but it's happened here sometimes. This is not an isolated incident. You'd better not get involved in this case. Muse Scott, please tell me what happened to Kate, Dorian's ex-girlfriend. Meline held the housekeeper's hand to keep her from leaving. She's dead, Muse Scott said through gritted teeth. I don't believe it. You're lying to me. Tell me the truth. Walker screamed. She squeezed the housekeeper's fingers tightly. Bobby, calm down. The woman pulled her hand out of Walker's iron fetters and rubbed it. Cynthia said, you're on sick leave for a week. Peggy can take care of 2. I'll do the laundry. When you go back to work, you'll have to do the laundry. I've got enough to do around the house. Muse Scott's gone. Oh no, a week just wasted. And not to know what would happen next after the family quarrel. Meline tried to get out of bed, but immediately fell backwards. A sharp headache pierced her skull. The girl fell into a short, dreamless sleep. The next morning, Peggy came in to see Walker. Looking at the cook's puffy face, Meline realized that Peggy was grieving for her colleague. I see you're all right. How's your head? Does it hurt? The woman hugged Meline. Don't worry, I'm on the mend, and I'll be back to work soon. Walker smiled happily. It's been like that. Peggy said. The landlady almost killed the poor girl. You should have seen the look on Dorian's face. He must have fallen head over heels in love with Lexi. Anyway, they're getting married and Cynthia's not happy about it. She's locked herself in her room, and sometimes I bring her food, but she won't touch it. What's going to happen next? I don't want it to be like Kate, Meline said and closed her eyes. Iggy, I need to get better. Daniel's been asking for you. Can he come over for a few minutes? He's worried, poor guy. Meline nodded affirmatively. We have to keep investigating, no matter what, and get out of this house while the bones are still intact. A week later, Meline went back to her job. Now she had to do laundry for extra pay. But the girl was not afraid of hardship. While you work, you have more time to think. The guard promised to show her his workplace. Well, she would get there today. Meline found Daniel in the backyard of the repair shop. He was lying under a car in a t-shirt, fixing something. What are you doing here? She exclaimed in surprise. Daniel climbed out from under the car and kissed Meline on the cheek. Well, now I'm not only a guard, but also a driver. Miji left and led Edgar away with her. They had been in love for a long time. I'm sorry, Meline replied inside. And now I'm not only a housekeeper, but also a laundress. Listen, do you know? I think Monica had a daughter who worked here. What happened to her? The laundress told me her daughter disappeared. Her daughter's name was Obi. She did work here, but I never saw her. Edgar Stanley told me everything. Miji had arranged for Obi to be her assistant. 20-year-old girl changed the linens and brought them to the laundress. The landlady's son had taken a liking to her. I think they even met in the backyard. But then Obi disappeared. Midgie was very sad. She searched for her daughter for a long time, but there were no leads. They say the washerwoman even wandered into the woods near our village. What is unusual about this forest? Walker asked curiously. Daniel wrinkled his nose as if he was remembering. They say the forest is enchanted, that if you go in there, you'll disappear without a trace. Sometimes they hear screaming and crying, the souls of lost people trying to find their way to paradise. Marnie laughed. Danielle, you're wonderful. I've never laughed so hard in my life. I'm sorry, but that's crazy. You still believe in spirits and enchanted forests. There's just animals out there, maybe even wolves. That's why they howl. Think what you want. Danielle looked at the girl piercingly. But I believe in otherworldly forces, and in God and spirits. Okay, I won't argue with you. Stubborn sheep, Meline thought to herself. You promised me you'd show me the place where you work. Walker smiled. Daniel agreed. He took a shower, changed into his usual security guard uniform, and led the girl to a one-story gray building that was a little to the left of the Smith mansion. There were many rooms in the building. Some of them were living rooms with bunks and desks. Others were. Meline caught one eye in the room where the monitor stood. Oh, how interesting. Let's go in here. She clapped her hands childishly. The young man frowned. But what could he do if a pretty girl agreed to his proposal? Daniel, come on in. Meline was the first to enter the den. It turned out that the surveillance cameras were not only outside, but also in the living room and hallways of the house. Walker's eyes searched for the recording device. The hard disk was at the very bottom, sticking out of the system unit. Well, what do you think? Interesting. Danielle asked quickly. He clearly didn't like the presence of a stranger in the den. Did you see it? Yes, it's cool. Meline made a surprised face. I'm shocked. The guard smiled and offered to go to his living room for coffee or tea. Walker agreed. Thoughts were flying around chaotically in her head. What to do to get the hard drive out? We should just stay the night at his place. Daniel led Meline to a very cozy room. There was a beautiful carved bed in the corner, a desk with a laptop near the window. The floor was decorated with a fluffy white rug. Daniel clearly liked comfort. The tea brewed by the guy was surprisingly tasty and fragrant. The guy already wanted to walk the girl out, but Meline knew the right thing to do. She stopped Daniel with a single glance and approached him closely. The boy's pupils dilated as he touched his lips to the lips of his favorite girl. This was something to dream about. It was going to be a hot night. Walker cautiously opened her eyes. Daniel was sound asleep. Of course, you should try to stay awake after a marathon like that, she smiled. She stood up, threw the guy's shirt over her naked body, pulled a flash drive out of her pants pocket, and tiptoed out into the hallway. The TV was blaring loudly in one of the living rooms. One has to remember that besides Daniel, there are two other employees on the property. She wished she didn't have to confront them. How would she explain to them why she was walking around the security housing unit in the nude? The monitor room was open. Bingo, the room's empty, so the rest of the guards are either sleeping or wandering the grounds. There were two guards slowly strolling by the fence, so Daniel was supposed to be sitting at the monitor today. The girl didn't want the guy to get fired because of her. She'd have to act fast. Walker was good friends with the computer, so she found the database in 1 minute and put it on download. Gotta wait 5 minutes. Too long. I hope no one catches me. There was 1 more minute to go. Walker stared at the monitor. There, Vincent walked slowly down the hallway to the bedroom. Dorian and Lexi were nowhere to be seen. But what was Cynthia doing in the dining room? The hostess on camera was sitting at a table surrounded by a pile of bottles and vials. She was stirring some kind of solution in a bowl. That's weird. Maybe she's making a night mask. What are you doing here? Daniel's voice sounded loud behind me. Oh no. He noticed it was missing and went to look for it. What was there to tell him if it was already obvious? Meline slowly took out the flash drive and hid it behind her back. What's going on here? What did you download? Give me the flash drive. The guy yelled. If you come near me, I'll scream. How will you explain what I was doing here? I'm not allowed in here, Walker said calmly. Did you take advantage of me? Danielle asked. There was bitterness in his voice. How could you? I was nice to you. We had great sex. I thought we were going to see each other again. Why do you need the information from the cameras? Meline didn't answer. To tell the truth about herself or not, the girl was starting to like Danielle. It's a shame it had to happen like this, because I'm not Obi. I'm Meline Walker. I'm a detective. I'm trying to investigate the disappearance of someone named Catherine, Dorian's ex-girlfriend. I'm sorry about that. I didn't mean to upset you, but I won't tell anyone I was at your place and saw the surveillance system. If you don't tell anyone I'm not who I say I am, let's go to my place. Nate. Danielle took her elbow firmly. I like you so damn much. I don't even want to be mad at you. I'll tell you the whole What? The girl's eyebrows slowly crept upward. Why all the running around, the deception, when you could just ask the guy, frankly confess everything? Meline walked into the room and sat down on the crumpled bed. Daniel stood in front of her and folded his arms in front of his chest. He was gorgeous in the moonlight, but very stern. Where did you come from? Aren't you afraid of death at all? The guard asked in surprise. I work at the Eagle Eye Detective Agency. She began. Kate's mother, Jody, came to see me 3 months ago. She was in deep mourning. Kate was Dorian's girlfriend and they had been dating for a long time. The daughter had even quarreled with her mother and moved out. Kate started living with Dorian at Smith's house. At first, everything was fine, but then Kate's sudden death from a stroke. Moreover, the girl was absolutely healthy according to her mother. There was very little information about the family on the internet, so there was nothing left but to infiltrate the house under a false name. My partner and co-owner of the agency, Brandon, helped me with the placement in this home. Danielle listened very carefully the whole time. You're crazy. He sighed. Lucky it happened the way it did. That I found out. If the landlady finds out, you won't leave this house. Why should I? Walker was surprised. Because, He ran his hands through his hair. You're right. Katya was murdered. And it's so tricky that no pathologist will ever know why. But Kate wasn't Cynthia's only victim. Are you saying the landlady killed the girl? Meline exclaimed. I suspected Dorian of that. He wanted to get rid of his annoying girlfriend. Bang! No, Dorian's a victim too. Of course, he's a total womanizer. I'm even a little jealous when he stares at you. Jealous, I mean. Daniel wrinkled his nose. And then what? The girl asked curiously, ignoring her boyfriend's state of mind. Let's start at the beginning. I came to work here for one reason. My mother was terminally ill. I needed expensive medicine treatment. Cynthia promised me a lot of money for my work. Of course, I accepted. I quickly found a common language with the rest of the staff. I didn't know what was going on inside the mansion walls until I got to my first post. You were there a few minutes ago. Daniel frowned. And what did you see? Meline shrieked. Don't shout like that. My staff might hear us. I saw Cynthia put something in Kate's glass. The girl didn't live a minute. It all happened in the cafeteria. The cameras recorded it. They made me erase it from the archives at the time. The police, of course, went through the hard drives, but to no avail. The Smiths promised me a large fee for my silence. Mother was getting worse, so there was nowhere to go. Kate's not the first girl. When I worked here, every time Doreen brought another pretty girl into the house, I knew she couldn't survive here. Cynthia would bite. Meline couldn't believe her ears. How? Surely everyone knows there are murders in this mansion. The girl's parents, the servants, friends, relatives of the family, and they're all silent. But why would Cynthia do such a thing? The girls were rich, wealthy, intelligent, didn't smoke or drink alcohol. They must have dressed smartly too, because the lady of the house has been sick for a long time. The husband hides everything carefully. Sometimes, when it's really hard, he takes his wife to a boarding house. There she's treated and sent home again. After the hospital, Cynthia is unrecognizable. But some time passes and the devil comes back into her. She's jealous of her only son. The jealousy turns into schizophrenia. Oh my God, you don't say anything. Why couldn't you go and tell the police? So many innocent girls died because of your silence. Meline was getting, well, I would have told them. And goodbye to my mother's peaceful and painless life. Haven't you ever had to sacrifice anything? Daniel asked in surprise. Meline wondered, Whether or not one could or could not be judged for inactivity was a decision for the authorities. Time to get ready. We must tell Jane. Danielle seemed to read her thoughts. He held her tightly against him and whispered, "Yo, don't you dare. I won't let you go. You must think of other people." All the servants knew about Cynthia's antics. "Are you going to tell everyone now, you white sheep?" Meline looked boldly into Daniel's eyes and lashed out with force. A moment more, and the guard was on the floor, pinned down tightly. "I may look like a weak woman, but the urge to break free is definitely there, isn't it?" Meline said happily, sitting on the guard's back. "Don't fight it. I'm not going anywhere yet. There's no official proof, and I didn't copy the data for nothing. I won't tell anyone about you. But I need you to help me with something." "What is it?" Daniel wheezed. He tried to pull the girl off of him, but he was unsuccessful. "We have to team up and catch Cynthia doing something illegal together, or get the truth out of her." "How do you want to get the truth out of her?" "Smith is a hard nut to crack. She'll keep her mouth shut even under torture. They don't go to jail for that sort of thing. Others will go to jail for them." "Oh," Daniel grumbled as Meline slid off him and sat down beside him. "Shall we see about that? Or are you going to be an accessory and witness to her crimes from now on? You're a good guy. Yeah, so good that you even decided to get in bed with me. Because of the security cameras," growled the guy. But he agreed. Despite that horrible night, Danielle was still attracted to Meline. A satisfied Walker walked out of the security building in the early morning hours. Daniel was at his post. He gave the girl a look and sighed. All because of women in this world. Meline, sitting in her room, pondered her next steps. One would have to be very careful. She felt that one extra step and a trap for the detective was assured. There was no need to look for an excuse to piss off the landlady. It happened the next day. Meline was cleaning the parlor when an excited cook came into the room. "Follow me." She bellowed, her eyes round, as if she were afraid of being seen. "Where are we going?" "Peggy, what happened?" Walker whispered. "Donnie asked me to bring you. He's in the backyard. If the guard runs into the house without a good reason, the missus will get suspicious." "Come on, drop your mop." Peggy shoved the screaming girl out of the mansion. Meline ran the rest of the way on her own. There he is, standing there, looking so handsome. The excitement made her hair stand on. "What happened? Did you tell the landlady about me?" Meline almost choked on her feelings. Meline clenched her hands into fists and threw herself at the guard. Daniel gripped Meline tightly and waited for her to collapse from helplessness. "Why are you fighting at once?" "I didn't tell you anything. I just wanted to warn you that something's going to happen tomorrow. Cynthia's plotting to get rid of Lexi and her own grandson. She came to me early this morning and offered me good money for my help, and you accepted." Medeline's face glistened with tears. "I knew you were a freak, even for your own mother. I would have left my mother to die, but I wouldn't kill innocent people. I hate you." Daniel stopped her speech. "No, of course not." I agreed, but only for the sake of discovering her personality, her sick essence, together with you. That's why we have to stop her together. Meline had an epiphany. "So that's what this is all about." The guard was very wise. "What did she tell you? What's her plan?" "I'm gonna talk fast. They might see us." Danielle looked around quickly. "Dorian doesn't know anything and can't know anything before we're done. Cynthia ordered me to go into the woods today and dig a deep hole. Clearly, she wants to bury Lexi. Get rid of her. Now listen, I've got an idea of what we're gonna do. We're gonna do it the smart way. I found a long and spacious box that Lexi can fit in. I'll make a hole in the crate and put a drain pipe in it. That way Lexi can breathe underground. The landlady will probably want to see if I buried her. Then, after 24 hours, as Lexi is buried alive, then we retrieve her. Lexi comes home to the Smiths, sees the fear in their eye. Next thing you know, it's riot police. How about that? Wow, I'm shocked." The girl whispered enthusiastically. "You could be a born detective. Are we going to tell Lexi about our—" "Yes, but later. The main thing is not to spook her. As cruel as it is, Lexi will be bait for the big fish." Cynthia, Meline, and Danielle discussed their plans for another half an hour. Walker must carry the recorder with her at all times and not be separated from it for a minute. There was no telling when the criminal would reveal her cards. Slowly it grew dark. Madeline's heart pounded loudly in her chest. Cynthia was surprisingly cheerful and cheerful. You bet tomorrow was a holiday. New Year's Eve. Guests and friends would be coming. It's going to be fun. And the mistress will no longer worry about her unofficial daughter-in-law and grandson. Well, at least until the next time they meet. Today, Cynthia sent her husband and son out shopping for holiday gifts. What a stroke of luck. No one will have any idea what happened to Lexi. The hostess set the table herself and invited the girl to dine with her. Self to Meline helped and retired to the kitchen on Cynthia's orders. Of course, no one must know of the crime. Peggy was trembling with fear, but Meline reassured her. The detective knew what would happen next. The cunning hostess had slipped a strong dose of sleeping pills into the compote. Then it was all in Daniel's hands. Oh my God, I didn't know I was working for a killer. Making her food. If I'd known, I would have slipped her something, Peggy hissed. It's time to bring her to justice. Let's pray that everything goes according to plan. Meline Walker had told Brandon everything on the phone and had outside support. If anything went wrong and the girl didn't respond within 24 hours, Brandon was to call the police. Meanwhile, Lexi was already sound asleep, dropping her head on the couch. Cynthia, satisfied with her fine work, was cleaning up the evidence of the crime from the table. Through a crack in the door, Meline saw Daniel quietly enter the dining room. He picked Lexi up in his arms like a fluff ball and walked toward the exit. The hostess called out for Meline to clean the dishes and mop the floors. It's dusty in here, she murmured. Where did Lexi go? The housekeeper asked politely, trying not to pretend she knew. She was having dinner with you. Oh, those pregnant women are so weird. Lexi felt nauseous and went up to her room. Don't worry about her. It happens a lot to a girl in her condition, Meline said with a sly look. Oh, I'm going upstairs after all. I'll see if she needs a doctor. Dorian called, asking how she was. Cynthia instantly turned pale. She cried out like a wounded animal. What kind of servants are they? Boorish and insolent. Honey, I told you, there's no need to bother Lexi. She's tired. Go do what you're supposed to do. Meline, satisfied with Cynthia's reaction, silently cleaned up the dining room and hurried to the backyard where Daniel was supposed to be waiting for her. The guard was visibly nervous. Didn't anyone see you? He asked. What took you so long? I was cleaning up the dining room after dinner. UA Walker sighed. What's the deal? Daniel nodded and they got into the car. The guard checked on Lexi, who was sleeping like a baby. Shortly before this treacherous dinner, he had told the girl what was going to happen and how to act. Lexi was in deep shock, but agreed to help, and now she was going to stay in a damp box underground for 24 hours until New Year's Eve. Don't worry, I brought a bunch of warm blankets and a winter coat. Lexi's box will be warm. Meline snuggled into her boyfriend's strong arm. Finally, it would all be over soon, and she would be out of this damn place. The winter forest greeted them with cold and snow. Large snowdrifts lay everywhere. Meline felt a little uneasy. She imagined that she was the one being put into a box and covered with earth. The earth was pressing on her head, her chest, the box. What thoughts? We have to chase them away. Everything will be all right. The car stopped at the cozy Peggy's. Daniel got out and stood for a minute listening to the sounds of the forest. Oh, it's nice here in the summer. He mumbled. The girl didn't think so. What if there were more graves? What if the bloodthirsty mistress had set up a graveyard of girls here? I don't even think so. I don't think so. She replied. After the owner is arrested, we should gently hint to the investigating authorities that it would be a good idea to take a walk around and look at the mounds. Do you think so? Daniel said quietly. He took Madeline's hand and squeezed it tightly in his. The girl closed her eyes affirmatively. Not far from the car, under a willow tree, was a huge black hole. A massive wooden box stood. The guard carefully took out Lexi, who was sleeping soundly, wrapped in blankets, and put the girl in the box. He also threw an old fur coat on top. Meline helped close the lid. You had to be good with a screwdriver. I'll just put a little earth on it, so it won't squeeze through the tree. I'll put more snow on top, Daniel said in a shaky voice. He put the long flow pipe into the hole he had made in the box and breathed a sigh of relief. It was all the right size. As wisps of frozen earth fell thuddingly against the lid of the box, Meline felt like she was attending a real funeral. Just make sure Lexi doesn't get hysterical when she wakes up. Okay, it's done. I'm gonna camouflage the pipe a little bit and take some pictures for Cynthia. Then I'll open the pipe again. That's what he did. Meline was uneasy. All the way home, she begged that Lexi wouldn't suffocate, that it would all be over sooner. Maybe with her nerves, she shouldn't be a detective anymore. A florist or an accountant would be much better. You can sit back and not be threatened. How could she have gotten herself in such a mess? Meanwhile, Brandon, her co-worker, who must also suffer and agonize, sits at home and devours a second box of pizza with sausage or cheese. Walker's musings were interrupted by Daniel's voice. That's it. Here we go. Meline thought for a second. Then she asked decisively, "Can I stay with you tonight?" "I'm too scared to stay at home." Daniel smiled, and they walked toward the security building. Paradise Corner was glowing with colorful lights. The village had been busy since morning, and the guards were working hard. Relatives and friends of the rich were coming to the village in luxury expensive cars. In the middle of the Paradise Corner, the residents themselves installed a huge live Christmas tree, a joy for the next 2 or 3 weeks for the children of the majors. The tree was decorated with colorful lanterns and big balls. The smell of goodies and kebabs wafted everywhere. The male part of the population traditionally roasted meat for New Year's tables. Only the Smith mansion did not light its holiday lights this morning. The house was in a frenzy. Dorian was throwing plates hysterically, Cynthia screaming pleadingly for him to stop. The servants gathered in the dining room and watched as the Smith son shamelessly destroyed the holiday sets. "Where's Lexi, you monster?" he yelled at his mother. "How many times have I told you to stop meddling? In my life." Another plate flew into the wall. Peggy groaned and sat down. She didn't really want to get hit in the forehead with the next piece of dishware. Meline woke up on New Year's Eve morning in Daniel's arms. A strong wind was blowing through the window, small snowflakes flying. Here comes the last day in this hellish place. Then freedom, thought the girl. She kissed the sleeping guy and quickly got ready. I wonder what's in the Smith mansion. During Meline arrived at the house, she saw a stunning scene. Dorian packing his suitcase, Cynthia running from corner to corner with her hands clasped together, Vincent sitting in a chair, his face expressionless. Peggy was crying in a corner. Muse Scott was running after the landlady with valerian and ammonia. Fine, now we have to wait until evening, Walker thought. She could hear Muse Scott calling the guests and politely telling each one that the hostess was ill and the party at their house was canceled. Too bad. There would have been plenty of witnesses to Lexi's mysterious resurrection. Poor thing. Meline found Daniel in the barn. "It's time," he said. "Wait, I'll get the car out and get a shovel. I'll get a thermos too. Poor thing's freezing. I'll get the tea." Meline shouted and ran into the kitchen. Peggy was there. She was sobbing and huddled on the table. When the girl came into the room, the cook came up. "Cynthia knows all about your plans. She is looking all over the house for you. Run, my girl." Meline turned around and wanted to open the door, but she was beaten to it. A strong and hard hand grabbed the girl by the scruff of the neck. It was Cynthia. She let out a victorious yell and dragged Walker upstairs. No, Meline has to go after Lexi now. At least Peggy had warned Daniel. Let him go on his own, get the girl. While she distracts the old git, Cynthia shut the door noisily behind her and groaned in triumph. "Oh, I know all about you, bitch. Who you are and why you came here. I'm not letting you out of here alive." Meline remembered that she still had her tape recorder in her pants pocket. She decided not to waste any more time. "Oh, come on. You're the one who hired me," Walker said wryly. The only thought in her head was, what a bunch of Adamses. Disgusting. If I'd seen what could happen in that rich, old mansion earlier, I would never have worked there. Cynthia frantically searched the nightstand for her pills. She cursed irritably every time she failed to find the vial in the next locker. Abandoning her futile efforts, the woman walked over to the safe, opened the code lock, and pulled out a gun. If I had known who you were, I would have shot you in the agency." She hysterical, and believe me, I wouldn't have gotten anything for it. I'd have given money to the management and they would have kept their mouths shut. What did you find out, you bitch? Just what I needed, Meline replied and laughed. Tell me, how did you manage to cover up the mass murder of all the Dorian girls? And more importantly, why did you do it? Cynthia quieted down and asked in a whisper, sitting down on the bed. How did you find out about it? I didn't tell anyone. Even my husband sometimes didn't know how I had to hide the corpses, so it was you who killed them? Well, not always. Kate did. I just overdid it with the poison. But the pathologist didn't even think to send the blood for poison testing. The rest of them were helped by drivers and guards. And with Lexi, Meline said slowly, May, did you give her sleeping pills and bury her alive? Well, I was fine with Lexi at first. I thought Dorian would play with her and toss her aside like a toy. But he didn't. He got her pregnant. It was immediately clear that it had to end. Cynthia sighed noisily and scratched her temple with her pistol. Why are you asking me all this? You're not going to live anyway. You think you can sneak out of my house? The guards have served me well for a long time, so don't get your hopes up. Meline decided to ask another question. Why? Why did you do all this? Isn't it nice for a mother to know that her son is a happy family man? Dorian tried to find his soulmate every time, but you wouldn't let him. I grew up in a rich family, Cynthia began. I had no siblings. My parents spoiled me all the time. I was used to having everything handed to me as a child. When I met Vidley, I realized that he would be mine too, forever. Dorian, though he grew up alone without brothers and sisters, didn't grow up like me. My son was the life of the party. He liked to give and share. Basically, he did all the things that pissed me off, and I was jealous of all those girls who wanted to take my son away from me. Yeah, I got rid of them hard, but I love my Dorian. Love can explain everything, but it's a sick love, Meline sneered. You're sick. You need to stay in the clinic under lock and key. How many victims have died at your hands? Somewhere over 10 beauties. But I don't regret it one bit. They will only bring disappointment to me. What about Lexi? She carried your grandson. Lexi was a good girl, but she didn't know how to treat my Dorian well. They were always fighting. Okay, we've talked enough. Don't worry, you won't suffer. Cynthia was about to point the gun at the frightened girl, but there was a noise and the sound of breaking glass downstairs. Another minute, and people rushed into the mistress' bedroom. Danielle, a pale Lexi, Dorian, and many more. Magie was among them. She cried, Meline, are you okay? A guard rushed to the girl. Meline was trembling, whether from fear or Lexi. The owner exclaimed, losing her mind. How did you get here? You're dead. The girl smiled sadly. Yes, I was supposed to be buried asleep. How cruel you have to be to get rid of yourself that way. Irene went out into the corridor and shouted to someone, you can take it. It's all right. An assault team flew into the bedroom in full armor. They threw Cynthia to the floor. The woman did not resist. She only moaned and hurled angry curses. The investigation to solve the series of murders stretched on for a long time. Evil mistress of an ancient mansion killed more than one innocent girl, each one with particular cruelty. Vincent Taylor and Dorian Smith were also charged with covering up the crime and helping to facilitate the atrocity. Meline was able to return home. The first thing she did was to call Jean. Good afternoon. This is Meline Walker. I can now tell you that your case has been reopened. Kate did die, not die of natural causes. I will give you the address of the investigation team that is currently looking into this. Jody was grateful for the young detective's work. She even advised her acquaintances to contact Meline Walker if suddenly need to solve an important and mysterious case. The entire staff of the mansion was fired and taken for long interrogations. Lexi had returned to her parents and was now enjoying her pregnancy. Never mind Dorian. Cynthia was placed in a mental institution where she was nursed back to health after the forest, at Madeline's request, had been completely checked and something terrible had been found there. In the thickest part of the forest, where it is difficult to pass without sticks or an axe, there were many bumps resembling graves. When the investigator, together with his team, exhumed the remains of the bodies, he confirmed that they were Dorian's ex-girlfriends. Monica's daughter was among them. When the former washerwoman found out, she went to hospital with a heart attack. She could not calmly endure the fact that her favorite mistress ruthlessly massacred the only child of the servants. Also, Traces of potent poisons were found in Cynthia's bedroom. The vials themselves were nowhere to be found. Apparently, the cunning landlady had hidden them or disposed of the evidence. Meline and Daniel continued to date. The boy got a job at Madeline's agency and now helped the girl with everything. Brandon, when he found out that Meline had found a lover, was not very much upset. At that time, he had already found a beautiful person from the kind of intellectuals and spent a lot of time in her company. Meline Walker first time just lay in bed and enjoyed the tranquility. At last one could lie down and not have to clean anything. The girl was much interested in the details of the development of the case. How good that grief-stricken relatives were able to bury their children and calm down. After all, some had hoped for years that their daughters were missing. Meline learns that Peggy, the cook at the mansion, has taken a job at the local bakery as a baker and is even successfully improving her bread baking skills. Brandon and Mila, Daniel, and Meline sat in a cozy cafe at the intersection of the main streets. Walker loved this place. She'd often eaten the mouth-watering buns and croissants here before, but now she just enjoyed the good company. "Walker, you're the talk of the Paradise Corner." Brandon exclaimed happily, and all over the news. "You're a local celebrity now. You get the best-looking coffee cup. Oh, it doesn't matter what cup you drink from, as long as it tastes good," she said. Brandon laughed merrily. "When's the wedding, lovebirds?" He asked Daniel. He thought about it and said, "Why don't you ask Meline? I keep calling her, but nothing. The fish aren't biting." Meline didn't say anything. She knew that Daniel had received a letter from the police calling him in for questioning as a defendant. The thought that her boyfriend could be sentenced to prison made it hard to make any further plans for his life. Daniel realized it himself, so he didn't stress the girl with his desire to create a family. "It'll be okay," he said with a look at Meline, and she winked when the investigation into Daniel's involvement in the abuse and murder of girls began. The prosecution got its way. The guy was facing 2 years in a maximum security penal colony. Meline agreed to wait for him and not meet anyone. It was a cold winter day. All the holidays had passed Meline by, so she decided to catch up and have a small New Year's Eve party at home. When the girl finished, she was satisfied with her work. A small Christmas tree stood in the corner, decorated with homemade toys. Meline, living alone, did not celebrate holidays at home. A couple of salads, tangerines, and a bottle of champagne were on the table. Meline took another look around the room and was pleased with herself. "Oh, what a hostess I am," she said to herself. The doorbell rang. There she was, standing there, red with frost, holding a box with a red bow. "Maggie." The girl rushed to hug her friend. The former cook had become close friends with Walker, and Meline often invited her for walks and visits. Now Peggy came into the house and filled it with her laughter, her lively smile, and her joy. "Do you think Daniel will come back as he was before the colony?" Meline asked Peggy. She was silent for a moment, finished her salad, and answered, "You know, everything in life is fair. A lot of people have relatives die, but that doesn't give a man absolutely no right to take the lives of others. In fact, Daniel, like Cynthia, is a killer. It's good for him to realize that, and also that when he gets out of prison, he remembers what he did and doesn't repeat his mistakes." Meline sighed and drank her glass of champagne in a gulp. She wished that all the people in whom anger and hatred lived would one day realize that it was possible to live differently and appreciate every minute. The snow fell and fell. The friends were laughing loudly. Next year promised to be even more